Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Grafton Select Board meeting for July 20th. I call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. First up, I would like to have everyone stand for Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. I just have a couple of announcements to make. Just as a reminder, the Municipal Center is now open late on Tuesdays until 7 p.m. Just a reminder that because of that, the town Municipal Center hours will close at 1 p.m. on Fridays. This was hot on everyone's topic over here for the past few weeks, but the trash and recycling collection calendar has been published. There is a new trash calendar and for recycling that has been issued. It was mailed to residents' homes, and it's available online at the town's website at www.grafton-ma.gov. Please note that the weekly curbside collection days have not changed from the last calendar that was for the past couple years. That is all I have for announcements. Is there anybody from the public who would like to make a brief comment to the board tonight? All right, I'm not seeing any. Okay, first up, we have a public hearing for Verizon. This is an ascertainment hearing for cable franchise license. And at this time, I will entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
I move the board vote to open the public hearing for the Verizon license renewal proceeding.
Second.
I have a motion made and second. Any discussion on opening the public hearing? Hearing none. This will be a roll call vote of the select board. I will call with Ms. DeFazio.
DeFazio, aye.
Mr. Mead.
Mead, aye.
Mr. Often.
Often aye.
Ms. Roy.
Roy, aye.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried where public hearing is open. I would ask that the select board clerk please read back the legal notice.
The Town of Grafton, by the Select Board as statutory cable license issuing authority, will hold a public ascertainment hearing on Tuesday, July 20th, 2021 at 7 p.m. to identify cable-related needs of the town and public in connection with the possible renewal of cable license issued to Verizon New England, Inc. The public hearing will be held in Conference Room A on the first floor of the Grafton Municipal Center, 30 Providence Road, Grafton, at the date and time specified above. If there's remote meeting participation available, it will be on the July 20th agenda posted on the Town of Grafton website and the Town Hall. Please call the Select Board office at 508-839-5335, extension 1180 for more information if needed. This proceeding is held pursuant to Federal Law 47 U.S.C. 546 to ascertain Grafton cable-related needs as part of the Verizon cable license renewal process. Public comment on local cable needs and past performance of Verizon is invited. Copies of the town renewal records, if any, may be available for inspection at the office of the Select Board or by contacting the office of the town administrator, care of the Select Board at the Grafton Memorial Municipal Center. By order of the Select Board as statutory license issuing authority.
Thank you, Mr. Often. Before we get into the hearing, I just would like to make an introduction here tonight. With us, we have Special Town Counsel Bill August, who handles all of our cable-related matters. Good evening, Mr. August.
Good evening. Good to see you all.
Good to see you, too. And also with us tonight, I believe we have Mr. Jim Gallagher. And I just want to know if Mr. Berger is online as well.
He's not.
He's not. Okay. Per request, I received notice earlier this evening that Mr. Gallagher would like to just open with a statement before we get on with the rest of the public hearing. Is that correct, Mr. Gallagher, and are you prepared?
That's correct. And I thank you for that. As all of you know, we have been for months and months negotiating a contract with Verizon. And we'll get into some details here and answer your questions. But I really need to say at the beginning of this meeting that the work that has been done by this committee has been stellar, has been absolutely incredible. Our leadership from Bill August and on the committee, Bob DeToma and Bob Berger have done a wonderful job working along with Peter Carlson and Joanne Duncan. And that I can tell you that what you're being presented with tonight is a contract that if you compare it to any city or town in the Commonwealth that is of the same size as Grafton, you will find that not one of them has negotiated a better contract with Verizon than this committee has done. So I literally take off my hat to this committee, and I will turn it over at this point here to Bob DeToma. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And with us also tonight is Mr. DeToma. I'm sorry, Bob, for not putting that introduction out. At this point in time, either Mr. DeToma, Mr. August, do you have any opening remarks?
Just wanted to thank Jim for his comments and just remind the board that every 5 years we enter into these negotiations with Verizon. And as Mr. Gallagher stated, Mr. Berger and I and Mr. August work very closely and report back to the Cable Oversight Committee on our progress in pursuing this 5-year contract. But as far as the details and the nuts and bolts are concerned, I'll turn that over to Attorney August, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you all. We just concluded a couple of months ago a successful renewal with Charter also, in addition to Jim's discussing this successes with the with the Verizon license, which is the current subject. I'm just mentioning that because we're going, the Charter renewal was so successful. We have the maximum permitted under federal law, 5% of gross annual revenues. That's the maximum. We just renewed with Charter. And on top of that, something which is now very rare for Charter Spectrum, capital funding on top of the annual funding. So that puts us in a very strong position as we continue with the now pending Verizon renewal license. That's just in terms of the historical context with Charter. Where we are, and also I have to just commend the committee because they were terrific. I won't get into the details, but they prepared very itemized and credible equipment and facility needs for the studio and the video origination locations around the town, and detailed and itemized operating information, which surpassed that which I've seen from other committees. They put a lot of work into it, and it made the negotiations go smoothly. So we just did that in Charter renewal, and now we can try to recycle that into the pending Verizon process. And then just to close, I'll say, as during this pending process, on some levels, cable renewal, it sounds complicated, but the basic concept of this phase, is one word to keep in your mind, because this is what we're building. The main concept of the cable law is needs. The Federal Cable Act talks about, the franchising authority and its delegates have to have an ascertainment record, identifying the needs of your community. So to the selectmen who are select board, who are the licensing authority, and to the public, an viewing public, we're in a process of identifying needs. So any input and feedback about the benefits that have been provided by local programming and municipal coverage and school sports coverage and the different things, that's evidence of need, because you have a vibrant studio generating programming and there are benefits. The community expresses a need to continue that. There's been evidence of steady growth over the years in the activity level of the studio. And that's a strong argument for need, because if we had one level of support 5 years ago from Verizon and we've experienced increased demand and growth, that's all evidence of needing to continue, if not increase, the support. So we're in a process of identifying needs, and it's still at the kind of beginning of that process. So there's no heavy lifting right now. It's just we're going to comprehensively and carefully develop the needs record, and at that point, we will summarize that to the selectmen when we've completed that, and then seek the selectmen's, and then proceed into informal negotiations to try to generate a draft license to recommend to the selectmen. So that's what we're doing.
Thank you, Mr. August. So before I open this up to the rest of the public, something that I was just made aware of tonight, and this question goes to Mr. DeToma, Mr. Gallagher, Mr. Berger, myself, was just the involvement of the Cable Oversight Committee. It was made aware of me tonight prior to the meeting that members of that committee weren't aware that this public hearing was occurring tonight. Can you just, give a background on that? Because that'll determine whether or not I ask this board to continue the public hearing to allow for further comment.
Well, we as a matter of fact, we met last night, and we're again still ready for this presentation tonight. And as you can see, with the presence of Mr. DeToma and myself, the board certainly has been involved in every facet of these negotiations, and we were aware of this hearing, and we're ready to go forward.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, at this point, I'll open up the public for any comments. All right, I'm not seeing any from the public. Bob, did you want to?
Well,
You're
This is
here.
my- this
Did
is
you
my-
want? Did you want to make a comment? Please speak to the license renewal process only, please. Thank you.
well, I can't because I wasn't told this was gonna happen tonight. I'm the vice
Yes, you
chair of the
were, Bob.
committee. And this is my 38th year on the committee.
Okay. Okay. All right. Does anyone from the select board have any comments that they would like to make? Discussion about the license? Ms. Roy? No? Okay. I would just like to put on the record, if I could, for this hearing, this is something that I've also been a part of too. I've worked with Mr. August, and I've also worked with Mr. Hassinger, Mr. DeToma over the past years on both charter renewal, and actually we were the first group to bring in the Verizon license. I just want to say that we're a very fortunate community for having two cable television providers in Grafton that provides competition and options for our community. Not every community in the Commonwealth has this as a benefit. I would like to see a continued support equal to that of what Charter provides to our local cable access studio, and I look forward to working with this committee and the group and the people of Grafton in ensuring that we remain and have a good contract and that supports our studio's operations. That's all I have. Is there any other comments from the board before I entertain a motion to close the public hearing?
I have one procedural item.
Is it part of the public hearing, Mr. August, or is this something that
Yes.
you want to take? Okay, go ahead.
It's to submit a document as a hearing record exhibit. Because we so recently concluded the charter, now Spectrum, a renewal, the cable committee's document, it's entitled Grafton Cable Advisory Committee Ascertainment of Renewal Needs and Proposals, adopted February 24th, 2020. It's still applicable because many of the needs that were identified in the charter ascertainment, we can just incorporate into the record because it was just 2020 into this hearing record. So I'm just would like to enter that document I just referenced. It was voted by and approved by the Cable Advisory Committee, and also ratified and accepted by the town subsequently, and signed by the town administrator too. So it's relevant. It passes the relevance test for being an exhibit. I'd like to submit it.
Thank you. At this time, can we get the exhibit for Mr. August and add it to the meeting minutes in the public hearing? Thank you. All right. Thank you, Mr. August. Is there any other comments? No? Okay, I can entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I move the board vote to close the public hearing for the Verizon license renewal proceeding.
Second.
Motion made second. Any discussion on closing the public hearing? Hearing none. All those by roll call, please. Ms. DeFazio?
DeFazio, aye.
Mr. Mead?
Mead, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, aye.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Thank you. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Gallagher, Mr. Jatoma, Mr. August, for coming out tonight. We'll take it from here, and I know this is just part of the process, but we'll get the updates to the board as we develop these negotiations.
Okay, thank you all, and thank you, Chairman Carlson, for your hard work pushing Spectrum at the end. That helped really propel us to go the extra mile. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Have a great night.
Team
You too.
effort, Peter. It truly is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
My pleasure. Yep. All right, next up we have 4-leaf contract renewal.
So you have the contract in your packet. This is just a as-needed service that we've had on the books for quite a while. We did go out to contract to bid to see if we got any better pricing, but we did not. And so basically we use 4-leaf to come in and do plan reviews as needed if we start falling behind or if there's one that's beyond the scope of our ability to complete. So it's just somebody we keep in the stable, basically.
Great, thank you. Does any of the board members have any questions on this contract tonight?
So can we talk about, in the terms and conditions, number 9? So the consultant's liability is basically limited to the fees that we paid to them. I'm just wondering if our counsel is happy with that
Yes,
position on our liability versus theirs.
she is, yes.
Okay.
So the contract that is currently in the packet with the crossouts and stuff, though, that is our counsel's notes.
Got it.
So anything that she did not strike remained.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to authorize the chairman to sign the 4-leaf contract renewal.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those by roll call, please. Ms. DeFazio?
DeFazio, aye.
Mr. Mead?
Mead, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, aye.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Thank you very much. All right, next up, we have with us tonight quorum of the planning board. I know we have one member of the planning board who is remote. If the planning board would like to open its meeting?
All right, yes, I will call the planning board meeting to order, and because I do have one member participating remotely, I will call the roll of the members. Justin?
Here.
Bob?
Here.
Linda?
Here.
Prabhu?
Here.
And Dave is here. Our planning board is now in session, as it were.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Robbins. So tonight we have planning board associate member Maureen McCormick, who is here applying for the vacant role. Ms. McCormick, if you'd like to come up and have a seat. Ms. Cormack, I'm sorry, Ms. McCormack. I'm sorry, thank you. Good evening, how are you?
Good, and you?
Good, thank you for joining us. I'm going to hand this over to Mr. Robbins.
Okay, well, I'd like to first give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and your interest in serving as an associate on the planning board. And then I'm sure that, it's quite possible some of us will have questions for you.
Okay. Well, I've been living in Grafton for about 5 years. I've been renting right now out of my mother-in-law's house. And I was trying to get on the board last year, just not this board. Sorry, I'm trying. I've been interested in local government for a while, but I just wasn't sure what I wanted to do with it. Last year I tried to get on the recycling committee, but I guess that was being revamped, so I was going to try to get back on that this year. And then I was just messing around with the planning board and looking at all the things that are going to be coming up, especially with the affordable housing. And when I saw that this position got popped up, thought it would be an interesting avenue to explore.
Okay, well, I think, my first question to you is, if you could tell us a little bit about your understanding of what the planning board does. And, maybe you've watched some planning board meetings, maybe not, but if you may have some familiarity with the board. And so, and the follow-up question is your understanding of specifically of the role of the associate member.
Right. Well, I actually have a lot of questions about exactly what the role, because it seemed like it was a bit of a sparse description. But I did watch a couple of the planning board's meetings, and like I said, I have gone through some of the paperwork because I was curious about the affordable housing developments that were coming in. So I know a little bit about going over the building codes and making sure that all the water works and making sure that there's enough apartments and making sure that it fits in with the environment. Yeah.
Yeah, as you will learn in that role that quite a bit of what the board does is very fairly technical in nature for some of the permit reviews and so on. And there's a fair amount of a learning curve, as most of us who've been on the board a little or a long time, can remember how it does take a while. But in any case, other board members have questions.
Could you give us a little more about your background? I'm interested in, as Dave says, we do a lot of, we look at plans and we try to, we have to read them and
Right.
we have to read the zoning bylaw and the other rules in a lot more detail than and have a lot more understanding than some. So
Right.
I'm just interested in your background.
So before the pandemic, I was a logistics coordinator, and just in general, I like looking at street plans and trying to get just logistics in general, getting things from point A to point B to point C, and looking at all the maps. It's true I don't have much experience looking at the building codes, because I did look at some of the paperwork that y'all have to look through, and I was definitely getting a little bit cross-eyed. But I'm usually a pretty fast learner, and I am interested in picking up those skills.
We usually don't get too much into the building code, but the zoning bylaw and the
Yeah.
subdivision rules, and a few others. There was one other thing there. Oh, in your application, you were talking about elected versus, this position is appointed, not elected.
Right.
Which is probably the good news.
Yeah. No, yeah, I did know that, sort of. When I went to apply, it specifically said this is an elected position.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't let me apply through the website because it had to be on the little
Interesting,
thing.
because the rest of us are elected.
I was really surprised when it said this is an elected position. I was like,
Yeah.
And the other piece is, you get to come to a lot of meetings and not necessarily get to vote very much, because your job is, if one of the other members can't vote, either because they weren't at the hearings or have a conflict or something, then you step in as the fifth vote for special permits mostly, not some of the other things we do. But traditionally, our associate has always been there and participated fully in all of the dialogue and whatnot.
right.
Okay.
Justin, anything?
I think you two covered what I had.
Linda? Prabhu?
Same thing.
Any questions, Prabhu?
No questions. I've been, Mr. McCormick, I have been on the board for 2 years. My only, I don't know, you cannot see me. You can see me on the TV there on your right side. One of those places. From my perspective, I came in to learn, eyes wide open, and there is a lot of learning. We have some really highly experienced folks on the board. So when in doubt, ask questions. I'm always very supportive of volunteering for the town. So if all things go well, welcome aboard.
Peter, how about you? Let me throw it over to your board.
Of course. Anyone from the board have any questions?
Just a recommendation. So if we move forward with this, I would highly recommend that as soon as you have the opportunity, take the site plan review class from CMRPC. It's like the best thing that you can do to sort of quickly come up to speed on the process of those plan reviews.
Okay. I'll have to
Yeah.
look into
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a wealth of learning material available, and there is, when you consider the scope of the role of the board overall, there is a lot to learn. I mean, the major permitting activities we engage in are site plan review, special permit. There is subdivision review. There's plan review for. Your mind will probably your eyes will start crossing when you hear all these terminologies, and then there's there's another, the planning board also has a role in more longer term planning, hence the name.
Yeah.
So in addition to land use permitting, there is some longer term planning, and it so happens that the town is soon, and this is the planning board's responsibility, but we involve a lot of other people in it as well, and that is updating the comprehensive master plan for the town, which was last updated approximately 20 years ago. We are going to be embarking on that activity within the next 2 or 3 months. We haven't yet started talking about it, but that's a whole nother role that's independent of granting permits, but it's also going to turn out to be very interesting, I think. So, and as as Matt said, there's a lot that can be learned, as we've all kind of said.
Yeah.
You dive into it, and sometimes someone who becomes an associate member, when a vacancy opens up on the elected board, the associate member feels comfortable stepping in and running for election, and maybe to fill a vacancy. Sometimes the associate member finds out after a year or two that, this really isn't what I thought it was, and I don't want to stick with it. So, in a manner of speaking, it's sort of training.
Yeah.
Or it's getting to know the planning board without being committed to a full 3-year term. But
yeah,
but
that's kind
if-
of one of the reasons I was.
if it sounds like something you might be interested in, and if you're a quick learner and you're willing to take the time to do some study and so on, it's great. And of course, we would like to have an associate member, and we just recently our associate that we had for the past couple of years chose not to continue, so the opening made itself, and here you are. Any other questions, Bob?
Just don't forget, we also do scenic road permits.
That's right.
And
We can't forget that. We can't forget that, Bob.
No.
we can't forget that. No,
No.
couldn't we? please?
Scenic road permit. That's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
And what was? One of the reasons that this position is so important is because special permits require 4 yes votes, regardless. If there are only 3 people there, we have a quorum, but even if we all vote yes, it fails. So it's very important to have a full 5 votes available. So that's why the law
Yeah, that's basically
creates your position.
right. That's basically why the associate position was created the way it is.
If there's any
So
other,
yes, it's very important.
any other questions from the select board?
I just have a comment, really.
Go ahead, Doreen, and Colleen, I'll get you next.
I just wanted to say thank you for applying and stepping up to. It's really nice and refreshing to have people volunteer in local government who are new to it. I think I'm speaking for all of us. The same group of people tends to get involved in this, and it's always nice to have someone with a fresh set of eyes and coming in with a different perspective. And you certainly picked a really important committee in our town and a bunch of people who are very passionate about it that you'll learn pretty quickly from. So I just wanted to say thank you, because it's always
Yes.
nice to
No,
have a new face.
I'm glad that my inexperience isn't a knock against me.
Definitely not.
I'll second that. And
We all started at some point or not. So
yeah.
yeah.
Those of us who've been actively involved in town government in one angle or another, in some of us here for decades. We all started somewhere. And we all started not knowing necessarily a whole lot about what we were getting into.
Yeah, so I'd really appreciate the opportunity if you hand it out, if you wish to offer to me.
Great. I've got
think
one
they have
question from one of our other members who's here remotely, Colleen Roy. Colleen?
So that was my question for the planning board. Is it typical for the associate member to kind of come on as a learning seat where they're kind of learning on the job as she's indicated she'll be doing? Is that historically how the seat has been handled?
It varies, that often, but not always, an associate member comes on and finds out that they like being a part of the board, and after, I think in one case we had not too many years ago, we had an associate who was on as an associate for about a year, and then one of the elected members either left or didn't run for re-election. So that associate decided that they were interested and got on the board. In other cases, someone may spend several years as an associate, and when an opening, it's happened, I think, more than a few times that the associate has stepped into the elected position.
I think it's been fairly common whenever we lost someone during their elected term, that the process involves us appointing a member to fill out until the next election. And most often, I think that's been the associate. And pretty much, I think every time that happened, then the associate has run for. In some cases, they've gotten to like run three times in a row, because the next year, they're filling the second year, and now they have to get elected to fill the third year of that term. Then they get to run to.
Any other members have any questions? I hope not. All right. Well, I would like to thank you very much for coming in tonight, Maura.
No, thank you for your time.
We're just going to discuss amongst ourselves, and at this point, I can entertain a motion.
I move that we make the appointment.
So do you need one for each board?
No.
Separately, or together?
To vote of all
You
of
want
them.
to do it, Mr. Robbins? You're the chair of the planning board. How do you want to handle that?
If you guys are comfortable with it, I think a single motion voted by all of us would be efficient.
Do you want me to step out?
No.
No. There's a few other people I'd like to ask to step out, but not you.
So
We need a
We're
second.
leaving soon. Right.
We need a second.
so I heard a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
All right. Moved and seconded that Maura McCormack be appointed to the position of associate member of the Grafton Planning Board. Is there any discussion of the motion?
I think the draft motion mentions when the term ends.
Right.
Would
Yes,
be a
the
really good
motion.
idea.
2023.
Yes, it's a 2-year term. The appointment is for a 2-year term. The motion is to appoint
Right.
or appoint her for a 2-year term expiring in 2023.
Yeah, I think it's the end of June,
So
isn't it?
could you amend your motion to be effective immediately through June 30th, 2023?
I think that was intended.
Yes, that was my.
That
Did
was
you
the
hear me say
intent of the motion.
Yes, and you could just say so moved and then.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you for that motion.
All right. There being no further discussion of the motion, I'll call a roll call vote of my board, and then you can do the same for your board. Justin,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prabhu,
Aye.
Dave votes aye.
All right, my select board, please. Mr. Fazio,
DeFazio, aye.
Mr. Mead,
Mead eye.
Mr. Often,
Often aye.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, aye.
Carlson, I declare our motion carried.
Motion carried unanimously. Congratulations. You will get the appropriate paperwork so you can get properly sworn in. And our next meeting is a week from last night. It's
Yes, next week.
7 o'clock.
Monday.
Here.
Monday next week, right here.
Okay.
Or zooming, maybe.
Yeah. Or Zoom.
I move we adjourn.
Second for planning board to adjourn.
Moved and seconded that the planning board be adjourned. Motion is not debatable. I'll call the roll. Justin,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Linda?
Aye.
Prabhu?
Aye.
Dave votes aye. The planning board is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for coming, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maura.
Congratulations and welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And some of us have to stick around for this meeting.
Yeah, some of us do.
Do I have to?
I had nothing else to do tonight.
Sue says you got a bunch of chores to do when you get home. All right, I want to welcome Candy Lavallee, our town clerk. Welcome. How are you?
I'm awesome. How's everyone?
Great.
Good.
Candy's here to talk about a proposed new appointment swearing protocol, and she would like to just run this by the select board and just update in general about how to handle these massive reappointments.
Yeah, so this is more, well, I know first of all, that the board is looking into updating their policy on this and appointments, so I figured it was the appropriate time to kind of mention mainly for the annual appointments where there seems to be so many that the process of swearing in can be updated. And what I would suggest, and I know this has been a tough year, but you know, we can still make some accommodations, but doing mass swear-ins and having like one night appointment or one night evening that we do that. Most people are in attendance for their appointments anyway. And then one morning or afternoon session. And then that way we get a bulk of the people, and this way we ensure they're sworn in. We get everything that we need. We're already sending people stuff that they need for their boards and committees via email, so we would continue with that. And it's just a little more efficient for both our office and all the appointees. So that's what I'm hoping to do going forward, and I think it's a great idea.
Great. Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions?
No, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people don't, as you know, a lot of people don't get sworn in because they don't understand the process, so.
Or we have people that come before the letters are ready, and this will, you know, allow everybody that plays a part to have everything prepared that needs to happen before people just come or, you know, don't come. And yeah.
Great.
Sounds great.
Colleen?
So I have a question on the mass swearing. If there are contested people going up, how would you have a letter prepared, or would you just prepare letters for everybody up for that seat and just pull the letter you would need?
So the letters actually come from the select board town administrator office. So that is something I think we'd have to discuss more and figure out that process of it. Like I said, there's different people that play different roles, so this was just my portion of it. So that's something I think we would definitely have to discuss and figure out how to handle that.
And just another question, if I could. If people couldn't make it to a mass swearing, you'd still be able to help schedule individual swear-ins if needed, correct?
Yes, this would just eliminate many people trying to come in at once and, you know, for that or before their board or committee meets, you know, in 2 days. So yes, absolutely. We'd still do individual ones if we had to.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Nope. I think this is a very good option for people. I think it's going to be more efficient, probably better experience too, and I think it helps you know, get through a bulk of the June process.
Yes. And funny enough, Paul Cook, the assistant, was like, well, I've got to meet like lots of new people, and I said that's one part of it, that's a good thing, but yeah, it just I think will be more efficient.
Great. And do you know of any other town or community that does something similar?
Yeah, there's, I forget which ones, because I you know, was looking to mention this. I think last year I brought it up really quick, but one of them, one town, I think it's Westwood maybe, that after their town meeting, they actually swear in their people right there. So, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
There's an idea.
Hey, I don't care. Parking lot, you tell me where to be, and I'll do it.
I know we have a new town moderator, so
Yes.
it might be a great collaboration in the making.
Absolutely.
And then they'd go to town meeting.
Then they go to town meeting. That's right. Colleen?
Town meeting usually happens before the annual appointment process.
Sure does. This is a community, I think theirs is afterwards.
Right. Might not work here.
Yeah. So, but yeah, we can discuss it more.
All right. Well, there was an idea. Okay.
You're good?
Well, thank you very much
Yeah,
for coming
have a
in tonight.
wonderful
Candy. We
evening.
appreciate
You
you.
too.
And we'll see you around.
All right, take care.
All right, next up, I want to thank Dave for sticking around here. But to bring back the discussion of the Open Space and Recreation Committee charge, so this was a result of actually several meetings that we've had. Dave has been great enough to participate and help bring forth the Open and Recreation Space Plan. And then part of our discussion led into, we really think we need to have a standing committee overviewing this. But I want to hand this over. We all seen a copy of the charge. I didn't know if any of the boards had any questions, or Dave, do you just want to go through the charge real quick and just touch upon the highlights?
Yeah, well, just sort of a quick review of why we're here. We put in a lot of effort, started in 2017, actually 2014, but it kind of didn't go anywhere, and we really sort of re-ramped it up in 2017. Finally got it done in 2021, an update of the Open Space and Recreation Plan. And looking at the result of all that work, the plan includes an action plan that has something like 65 action items, assigned to various combinations of something like 17 different departments and boards and other kinds of groups. So it's sort of if in 2020 hindsight, if I were to do it over again, I would try real hard to pare that action plan down. But it is what it is. And so the next question is, and we've had this discussion previously with you folks. We've got this wonderful action plan, 65 action items intended to be performed either ongoing or at various times over the next 7 years, the life of the plan. And the question is, well, do we put this plan on the shelf and let it gather dust, or do we actually try to follow through on the action plan? And so in hopes of being able to follow through on the action plan, I started thinking about, well, when you've got that many action items spread over that many different groups, and most of the action items have been assigned to multiple boards or committees. So like, here's one that's, well, the select boards should be partly responsible, as the planning boards involved, conservation is involved, various other combinations. So the question becomes, how do we see to it, how do we assign a primary responsibility? Say, for this action item, you are in charge of making sure it happens. For this one, you are, as a way of seeing to it that we follow through on the plan. So the idea is to, the committee that we've had to put together the plan, basically it fulfilled its mission by producing the plan. And so that committee arguably does not need to continue to exist as is. But to get somebody to sort of take overall responsibility for this, the idea is to create an Open Space and Recreation Plan Committee, basically the same name, but a rather different mission. The mission summarized here in the proposed charge is to coordinate the implementation of the 7-year action plan among the various departments, boards, committees, and organizations that are responsible for the action items. So in the proposed charge, I've listed the lifetime as indefinite. Arguably, you could say it's for the life of this current plan, 7 years, except that one of the action items is to update the plan before that 7 years is up. So this committee could sort of just take that as an ongoing mission, or by listing the lifetime as indefinite, that means that if this committee seems to have served its purpose, we could dissolve it. But for right now, let's assume that we've got a 7-year action plan, and this committee probably should be overseeing that action plan for that 7 years. The membership proposed is largely the same as in fact, it is the same as the committee that put together the plan. A representative from the Select Board, from the Planning Board, from the Conservation Commission, the Recreation Commission, the Land Trust. These are all the boards and committees that have a specific interest in this plan. And then 2 at-large members. We had 2 at-large members on the old committee. One of them moved out of town and was never replaced. But by the time that happened, there wasn't a whole lot of work left to be done in the committee, so that we didn't try to get anybody replaced. And for this, sort of an oversight role, long-term, I'm not sure that it needs to meet more than once a year. Basically, an annual review of where we're at with the action plan. Starting out when this committee is first formed, it's going to have some more work to do. So it's probably going to be meeting frequently for the first 2 or 3 meetings, however long it takes to get things set up and get the ball started rolling. And then after that, an annual review is probably sufficient. At least that was my thinking. The responsibilities for the committee, I've tried to keep this simple to first and foremost, assign primary responsibility for each action item to one specific department, board, or committee. Generally, that would be one of the entities identified as responsible parties for the action item. But it may be that in some cases, and I'd leave it up to the committee to determine this, that this committee itself might be the most appropriate committee to be overall responsible for, like the action item to update the plan. This committee is probably the right place to assign responsibility for that. But I'd leave it up to the committee to figure out the best committee to be responsible for each action item, and then to revise the action plan to whatever extent might turn out to be necessary to reflect changing circumstances and new information. And then sort of the annual, the annual reporting, at least annually report on the status of all action items to all of the boards that are represented on the committee and to the public, which would include, probably doesn't need to be said in so many words, but I did, a summary report for inclusion in the annual town report. And then finally, I thought it might be worthwhile to try to make sure that we maintain a presence on the town website with the current plan and the status of the action plan, again, for public consumption, so the public can see what we're doing for this open space and recreation plan. So that's the proposal. It's obviously up to this board here to review that and decide whether to adopt it in some form. I don't have a proprietary interest in seeing this adopted exactly as proposed, but you got to put something on the table to work from.
Sure thing.
So that's where I'm at with that.
Thanks. If any of the committee members have any questions or comments, Doreen?
Dave, thank you for all this work, and thank you for also reiterating the reason why we wanted to bring this committee forward. I think the select board had determined a few months back that we wanted this to be a living document, and once your other committee finished the work, there were no action items taken. So I think this is a very important next step. I had just a few comments to consider that just add maybe a little more parameters around the committee. And one is, it was brought up, I think when the first time you came to our meeting, maybe last fall, I don't know, 2020 is a blur, but when we were all on Zoom, there was a discussion about how other committees, I'm going to use the Affordable Housing Trust as an example, that there could be, we want to alleviate any sort of contradiction between different plans happening in town. And so I would like to see this new committee that's being formed be able to meet or at least touch base with some of these other committees to make sure that we are sort of alleviating any sort of crossover in, let's say, an overall master plan. And then the second thing was meeting more than once a year. I think that for me, I'd love to see quarterly, but I don't know if there'd be enough work involved for that, but maybe just a touch point mid-year where the committee is responsible for looking at those action items and reaching out to those committees and saying how it's going. Six months have gone by. You have a deliverable to us by this date, and either push it along, or if questions need to be asked, that would be a good time frame to do so. I think that those are the two. Oh, and then involvement in the master plan, which we've sort of covered because that is coming up again. I think that this whole open space plan, and as we determine what these action items are looking at, I think that's my concern about really working with other committees to make sure that we have a complete visionary plan for the town, and that this works well with it and the action items work well with it.
Yes, it did occur to me that quarterly wouldn't be bad. But about once a quarter, everybody reports back to this committee. Here's what we've done, or the committee reaches us. What have you done these last 3 months? And I sort of took a step back and said, well, it's got to be at least once a year. It could be more. And
it's a select board. We may need a little hand holding. We may need a little reminder that, hey, you guys are responsible for this.
Yes,
Here's your, can you give us a quarterly update?
I would not be
example?
opposed to that. And as far as the connection with the master plan goes, I'm aware that some towns have basically incorporated the open space and recreation plan into the master plan. And going forward, as we very briefly mentioned earlier tonight, we are going to be embarking on an effort to update our master plan, and that I view it as absolutely essential that the work we put into the open space and recreation plan be carried forward into the master plan, because open space and recreation is a part of the master plan, and to the extent that this committee would be appropriate for this committee to work with whatever organization we form to take care of the master plan. And that's, I think, Chris, we're sort of estimating that it could take us up to 3 years to complete the master plan update. And so this is sort of this will be kind of ongoing and probably evolving. But yeah, it's probably worth mentioning in whatever we come up with for a final charge for this, that we will coordinate this with the master plan update effort and any other town bodies that where it seems appropriate to do some coordination. Remembering that the open space and recreation plan, particularly as it relates to land use, which is the topic where we are worried about there being conflicts, its purpose is to identify potential open space and recreation uses for land. But a particular parcel of land may have a potential recreation use. It may have a potential value as open space. It may have a potential value as something else. And so if you've identified the recreation value, you've identified the open space value, you want to make sure that you've identified other values. And in the end, any decisions made about that land must look a little bit beyond just any one particular use. And sort of, well, we've got several possibilities here. We're going to pick the best one, and if there's any kind of a plan in which that takes place, the context would be the master plan, because that covers everything.
Great.
Colleen?
Yes, so I had a question. Is it possible to use Viewpoint or some other software that we actually have already, where this committee could assign action items A, B, C to committee X on this date, and then allow those committees to work on it and update it in Viewpoint? So when this committee meets as infrequently as it will, they can just pull down from Viewpoint rather than doing all this outreach and chasing down other committees and departments, making sure they're getting done. It's all one central location for all that information. Is that possible?
I'm going to defer to Evan on that question.
No. So quite simply, sorry.
It's not a workshop, Evan.
Right.
Okay?
It's very informal.
I did recognize
People are wearing
I just want to say that
shorts.
for the record.
No, I'm just kidding. So the Viewpoint really isn't set up for that, but you could do something similar to that with either Google Drive or Wunderlist or Monday or something that is either free or of very little cost to kind of make that workflow a little bit easier to manage for a group that meets fairly transiently.
Yes, I hadn't carried my thinking to the point of thinking about the mechanism by which we do all this coordination among committees, and it's if we, assuming we go forward to this, I think one of the things we would like to look at is, well, what is the most effective way to undertake this coordination and try to get things done and get things kept up to date with a minimum of effort. And I don't know the answer because I haven't. I've not given it any thought. I have a database with all the action items and responsible parties listed in it, but that may or may not have any value in setting up something to actually carry out the coordination. There's a whole nother level of thinking that once we get this committee set up, I would expect us to work out the most effective methods of accomplishing the coordination.
So I know we touched upon some of the responsibilities and just some of the action items. I think that's ways away, but let's just go down the list. Is any comment? Do you have any comments from the board on just the membership structure that's being presented here tonight? Just want to see if we could just kind of check off some of these boxes and we can move this along a little bit.
Yeah, no, I don't know.
I think it's good.
Okay. And the schedule. Oh, go ahead.
Can we go back up to the I guess lifetime of this? I don't like the idea of indefinite. I would put it maybe at 10 years, just to give yourself that 7 years plus a little bit extra.
Well, yeah, I think if we wanted to put a finite lifetime on it, I would suggest 7 years, because we're talking about coordinating the implementation of a 7-year action plan. At the end of that 7 years, one of the action items will be an updated open space and recreation plan with a new 7-year action plan. So a 7-year lifetime to coincide with the life of the action plan would strike me as being appropriate.
All right.
So would it be fair to say this board that we can put a lifetime on here, June 30th of 2028? Right? Does anyone have any objections to that?
That's fine.
Okay. All right. So everyone's agreeable to that?
Yes.
Colleen? Okay. Okay. Membership, no one had any schedule. I know we touched upon that. I guess we'll just leave that up to the committee, to your point, if they need to meet quarterly, because we're going to have a select board rep on there. And that select board rep's going to...
Be me. Is that what you're saying?
That's a great suggestion.
So moved.
This is how it works. I say we get through the charge first, then we'll
please.
appoint you as the first member. So what we'll do is, I'm okay with just leaving it as is, and if the board rep needs to see more meetings, then they can make that request and they can do so. But I agree, at least annually.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I said at least annual.
I like that. Yeah.
Me too.
It leaves the door open to meeting more frequently.
Everybody agreeable to that?
Yes.
Yep.
Colleen? Okay, and then just on the responsibilities, I know we touched upon some of those just a few moments ago, but does anyone have another responsibility that's not listed here that you want to discuss? If not, are we okay with the ones that are presented?
So I think input to the master plan would kind of cover Doreen's ask about, covering the priorities for land use.
So something like coordinating with the revision, with the updating of the master plan.
Absolutely. I think you articulated it well, that really it is about land use, the concern. And I would like to have more clarity and discernment in terms of the way that the town thinks about land use and the various competing, affordable housing and conservation and
Yeah, well, like I said, an important point to keep in mind is that from the perspective of this plan, we're looking at identifying potential recreation and open space uses for land. And we know those aren't the only two possible uses. So I think it would be entirely appropriate for us to think in terms of identifying recreation uses, identifying open space uses and other related things. But identifying them is not the same thing as committing to them. So identifying the uses is one thing. The town deciding what use to make is separate. I mean, we can't choose among 3 different uses if we don't know what they all are and the relative priority of them. So it's useful to keep that distinction in mind. It's one thing to identifying a recreation value for this piece of land doesn't commit us to using it that way.
I just want to get at what mechanism do we need in the responsibilities to accommodate participation and having input into the master plan? Is there wording in one of the bullet items that can be changed that would accommodate, or do we need to add an additional bullet item with that responsibility?
Just reading it, I would recommend you add a bullet point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So too.
And does anyone have any proposed language?
Coordinate with the master plan committee on the inclusion of the open space plan into the master plan.
That. Yep.
Maybe don't say master plan twice in the same sentence. maybe.
I knew what you meant. Yeah, I know
No,
what
we'll
you meant.
strike one, don't worry.
Okay, yeah, perfect.
Yeah, that works.
Two
That works for me.
plans. Well, I have one, we can have two.
Well,
So,
said plan. There we go.
does anyone have any objections to that, adding that as a bulleted item? Okay. Okay, Colleen?
Thank you.
Oh, okay. All right. I think at that point, so really the only two substantive changes that we're talking about is the lifetime, changing it from indefinite to June 30th, 2028, which is roughly a little less than 7 years by about a month, give or take, and then adding the responsibility of what Mr. Broussard had mentioned about participation and input into the master plan. Is there everyone good with that? And if you're good, I can want to take a motion on that tonight, or would you like to have that drafted and come back to us at a future meeting?
I'm happy to make a motion. I make a motion that we approve the Open Space and Recreation Committee proposed charge as amended during discussion.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All right. Yes.
Just this, not strictly related to the motion, but I rather suspect that a number of the people in this committee will also be involved in the development of the master plans,
Makes sense.
which would certainly facilitate the coordination.
Yes, I would agree. Any other discussion on the motion on the charge as amended during discussion? Hearing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio.
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Mead.
Mead eye.
Mr. Often.
After that.
Ms. Roy.
Roy, I.
Carlson, aye. Declare the motion carried and the charge created. We'll get that revised and ready to sign, and we'll get that posted up on the town webpage for availability, and we'll reach out to those committees for their prospective representatives, and we'll advertise for the two at-large positions. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sounds like a plan.
Sounds,
Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Dave, thanks for so much. You've done yeoman's work on this, and I can't say enough thank yous to you for your time and effort on this.
It's been my pleasure.
We appreciate it.
And it will continue to be.
Thank you very much.
I'm not sure, but I suspect that I might become the planning board's rep on this committee.
I would encourage the planning board to make that wise choice. Okay. All right. We've got a few other items here under schedule. Next up, I have 17 and 27 Upton Street RFP award. Do you want to just kind of give an overview on what you're asking us tonight?
Sure. So I'll do a brief intro and then I'll turn it over to Chris. This is Chris's area of expertise. So we are, as everyone knows, we went out for a RFP on 17 and 27 Upton, which is the old highway barn property across from Station 1. It loops around behind there's a residential property there and the post office, and then includes the, what do they call it, the town barn?
The wood barn.
The wood barn. So we went out for RFP and we got one responsive bidder, and that is GSX, which is the company that's doing our 8 Pine Street facility as well. Do you want to take it from there?
Yep, so just bringing that up to date, so we did receive that bid. In reviewing those with other boards and committees after to provide the recommendation to the select board, it was noticed that the original warrant article language included just 27 Upton, and so as a belt and suspenders, we went back to town meeting to include, it is 2 parcels, the 17 and 27 Upton. That has been voted on and approved at town meeting as amended. And so that brings us to today with the recommendations and having discussed with boards and committees, this the one application before us. I think it is a, quite a good application. One of the, key asks that the RFP was looking for was actual preservation of the woodshed and that barn piece that was included in that wraparound portion. Under this proposal, they're actually proposing to renovate that and keep the existing structure, renovate it into retail space, as well as a number of units for senior assisted living and additional 7,800 square feet of retail space on the ground floor, essentially at the highway DPW garage. So I believe the RFP documents have been included in the packet. So.
Mm-hmm. Yes. All right. Does any other board members have any questions for this?
Chris, how old are their numbers?
Sorry?
How old are their numbers? I went through their numbers
Mhm.
on the project, and do you know how old those are?
I'd have to look specifically when they did them, but
January 15th, I believe, is the time.
Actually, I
Of
think
this
what
year?
you're looking for, Ray, if I may add, is you're looking for the project pro forma, and what it
Yeah, I
begins
got-
the assumptions
that's
is
what it's-
February 22.
Okay. No, that's that February 22 is when they're gonna. I'm talking about their
Their numbers, I think, are based on that type of opening date. Or
their
completion.
budget their budget numbers for construction and everything else. That's January of this year.
That's when they submitted the RFP.
That's of last year when they submitted the RFP.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Michelle McGregor of GSX is on the call with her hand raised, so if you'd like me
Would you
to...
please, if the board's permission, I don't believe we had her on there, but would you like to, any objections from the board?
Go for it.
Please admit her to the meeting.
Right, she's rejoining and will be with us shortly.
Okay. Real quick, any other questions or comments from the board?
So I'd like to see, if it's all right, if there's, and maybe this is a question for Chris, is there an opportunity for the town to partner with GSX to try to jack up the number of affordable units?
Yes, so I know there has been some ongoing discussion with Affordable Housing Trust, providing some potential support with, for that to be that the affordability numbers would be of a higher ratio if the Affordable Housing Trust provided some financial support. I don't believe that there's a final agreement in place yet, but I know that is something that has been discussed with the project proponents.
So I would be very much interested in seeing if we can get them up to that 25% threshold. We've got a good thing going on with the 8 Pine Street. We're starting to put together enough so that we could actually get over that threshold if we really are aggressive with it. So I think it's in the town's best interest to try to pursue that opportunity.
And can you all hear me?
One second, Michelle, if I may, before I introduce you, I know Colleen had her hand up and she had a quick question, and then I'll bring you in next. Thank you.
Yeah, super quick. At town meeting, a resident had a concern about the deed of 17. That's all been rectified, and everything's good with that.
Correct. Yes, this would have been before the select board earlier, but we wanted to go to town meeting to rectify that and make sure that there was.
Sorry, I think Colleen's referencing the gentleman that got up with the different dated deeds and the two different parcels.
Yes. So so what that was, that's directly related to what the board was voting. So by including. So 17 and 27 Upton are actually two separate parcels, two separate deeds. The motion that was put before the town meeting on the warrant was actually to include, originally by doing just the 27 Upton, it didn't include both deeds as a technicality. So that revised motion includes both properties.
No, Colleen's
Right, but
referencing-
Evan, you got
Right.
my question.
Yes,
That's
I
all
did.
set?
So it's in motion, which is acceptable to council. So it shouldn't be a hurdle for us today. If the board wants to move forward with that. At town meeting, a gentleman raised that there were different deeds available for the two parcels, which showed them to not link in the back. And there was a question of that. So we have to do that full deed research. So it's my understanding that we would move forward with the RFP and then perform all that deed research in the background.
So we could make our motion contingent on that.
Yeah.
I don't even think you need to do that, Ray. I think you just make the motion, and then that's going to be part of the conveyance process. If there's an issue, then it comes back to then whatever action and we need to have corrective.
Right.
I'm sorry, we're quick.
I can speak to the deed question specifically.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so just briefly on the deed question, what Mr. Terrian was discussing was some of the history of that property. That it was at once upon a time it was the O'Hara property that was donated to the town, and it was donated in a couple different parcels. But there was a big parcel which once was a single parcel but has since been separated. One part of it is the Grafton Town Forest part, the Chestnut Street Forest, No, the part that is now known as 17 Upton Street was separated from that a good many years ago. I've got the data at home. I didn't know the question come up, and otherwise I could have brought it. But yeah, council, I'm sure, in researching and preparing deeds and so on, will discover that 17 Upton Street, as it is currently known, is a deed unto itself, as is 27. So those two parcels, but yeah, there's kind of a long history where boundary lines were changed, and I think that's what Mr. Terrian was referring to it at town meeting. But you know, for clarity, and as you said, council can confirm this by looking at the deeds. But there's no question about the validity and appropriateness of those two parcels and their deeds.
Okay, thank you very much. Michelle, hi, welcome. I'm sorry, thank you for being patient.
No worries. Thank you all. Chris and Evan did a nice job of overviewing. I just wanted to just make one minor comment, is that the property, the project that we're contemplating is not assisted living. It's more what we would call, it's either independent or active senior. So we're really not looking at a project that would require nursing care and home care. It would simply be for folks who are empty nesters. I don't know that we would necessarily think about age restricting it, but we would simply provide a product that would be for, you know, professors who had retired, or maybe, you know, they're empty nesters and they are still teaching at Tufts University, or folks that want to continue to live in the town of Grafton and they like the idea of walkability. So it would be more of a multifamily contemplation, but with the idea that it would be designed for active seniors. And hopefully you understand the distinction.
Yes, thank you for that clarification.
So I just have a question on that. So when you say it's designed for active seniors, so it's independent living, but it's not age restricted. Is that what you said?
Right. It would not be right. It would not be an assisted living.
No.
I think what in Massachusetts we generally refer to it as plus 55 housing. Michelle, is that what you're referring to?
Something, yes. Yeah, that's right. But I don't know that we would necessarily, we hadn't contemplated age restricting it.
Right. That's my question. Right. So independent living, generally is older people who don't have to be in a nursing home or assisted living or anything like that, and they moved into independent living with no services. Services can be available, but they you know, you pay for those separately. So what you're saying is this is going to be a project that will allow any age person to go into it and not be restricted to 55 and above.
That's correct. That's what our current
so
process is. Yes.
That's a bigger deal. So
well, I mean,
I thought that this project was an over 55 project. I didn't think it was independent living. I thought it was an over 55 project, and now we're hearing that it's not. This is going to be available. These apartments and facilities are going to be available for any age person.
Correct. Any other questions or comments from the board?
So, you know, this is the type of housing density that we need more of in Grafton. It's extremely tax efficient, and you know, it's when you combine this with what's happening at 25 Worcester Street, I think we're starting to develop that village feel with people with a walkable area around the common. I'm in full support of the project. I think it's great.
All right, any other comments? Colleen, did you have anything?
Yeah, I guess I wanted Ray to expand on his concern. He sounds pretty concerned, and I wanted to know what he's concerned about.
Well, I'm concerned that, and again, I think that this was originally proposed as an over 55 project. Over 55 projects in cities and towns are a great bonus to the cities and towns tax-wise and services-wise. What I'm hearing tonight is this is going to be an apartment complex that's going to allow anybody to go into it. And I know what Matt's talking about as far as affordability and everything like that, and I don't have a problem with that at all. But that does change the kind of the focus of this project. It's now, what we're hearing is going to be an apartment complex that anyone can go in, instead of an over 55 luxury apartment complex or condo complex.
It is contemplated to be designed that way. I mean, I hear what you're saying. It is contemplated to be designed that way. The bottom retail is contemplated to have, you know, a home health care business and a dock in the box kind of thing. So it really is designed that way, but we weren't contemplating age restricted. And I have my partner, John Grant, here on the phone too. John, did you want to add anything? John, can we hear you?
John's not on this call. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. He's with me here.
I think what I'm going to say is what we saw when we looked at the marketplace is there was needs throughout the community for all levels, from young to old. And what happens in these things typically is older people tend to reside there as time goes on. It becomes a senior community by choice rather than by design. So, you know, the project is going to have a significant amount of accessibility through the whole thing. You know, it's all elevated. There'll be a parking garage. They'll allow you to park on the same floor as the building. And, you know, I think we talked about it. We're trying to create a thing that's going to be most economically successful in the marketplace. So pigeonholing this thing to one group, we decided to let it open and let it naturally occur.
Do you envision that parking facility being open to the public?
Yeah, there's parking on each floor. So there's actually covered parking. So it is attractive to people who have disabilities and who are seniors, because they have to shovel.
But would you envision that parking be available to people that were attending something at the Common, for example? So non-residents, I guess, of the complex?
Well, you're talking about the medical facilities, or additional parking for people, the doctor's offices, yeah.
Okay.
The retail has additional parking.
So there was discussed with the barn and the retail space, you know, outside of hours of operations, where you've got some event going, that's just creating capacity in that area.
Got it. That's a huge issue, obviously, in that area.
Yeah.
So
And that was something we discussed when we met.
got it.
All right. Any other questions or comments on the board?
Mr. Chairman.
Doreen?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I want to go back to Ray's concern and just kind of understand a little bit more. So my understanding too was that this was going to be 55 and older. That being said, we're also working on 25 Worcester Street, which my understanding is that's going to be 55 and older. So is there, and I understand, thank you, Michelle, too, for your clarification on it. So we have a large senior population in our community, and I think you know, one of the things that we've been looking at is, particularly to the seniors who want to downsize, move out of their homes, stay in Grafton, there needs to be options. But I also want to say that I happen to have a daughter here, sorry to point you out, Emily, but in her 20s, and there's also not really homes designed for, you know, young adults as well in town. And so that's always something that I consider as well, is I feel like we have very limited luxury apartments or apartments in general for our younger adult population. And I would not necessarily frown upon Upton Street becoming any age group of people who want to either remain in Grafton because they grew up in town or because they're homeowners and they want to stay in town, or people who are coming into the community who are not yet ready to purchase a home. And so I'm in favor of it being, but that being said, I'd like to hear, because you have a lot of experience in development, of what your concerns would be, or besides the fact that we thought it was one thing and it's not.
If I may, Ray, I would like to add something to support your claim here, in that in the narrative, they talk about the impact narrative here. And in the paragraph I just want to read to the board, it's on page 62. Since 27 Upton would be the only active adult senior living project within a 25-mile radius of downtown Grafton, the project is anticipated to attract seniors to the town and contribute to its vibrancy and the preservation of its character. I mean, to me, I would agree, T. Ray, that sounds like it's like an active senior 55 plus living. But from what I'm hearing tonight, and Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, is a 22-year-old can move in there tomorrow, or an 18-year-old can move in there tomorrow, if this were there, correct?
I think what we said earlier is that we are planning to design it and make it accessible and attractive to the active adult or active senior, whatever you want to call it. But it could also be accessible to others. I mean, John, do you have another thought process on it?
The other thing is that we're planning on doing a 20% affordable housing component in that thing too, which also is one of the reasons why we wanted to open it up to all age groups.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I just want to point out that this part of your proposal, it talks about the financial impact, states something different. But what I'm hearing tonight is that you're not proposing an age restriction.
No, we're not proposing age restriction on this thing because, quite frankly, right now the marketplace is telling us that we need to leave it open, and essentially this becomes what we call a NORC, a naturally occurring retirement, because all the aspects of the housing, the parking, and everything else point towards that, but it's not specifically targeting just 55 and older.
Okay. Does any board members have any other questions?
People in the town who probably have kids, or other people who are people who work at the university and things like that, who are in their 40s or whatever, and may find this to be an attractive place to live as well. I mean, you're right in downtown.
All right. Dave, did you have another question?
Yeah, question for Michelle and John. If I remember right, reading in the RFP, you're proposing 1 and 2 bedroom units only. So these are basically apartments, 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom apartments, which, even though it's not age restricted, that sort of tends to give you a sense of who would be attracted to these. A family of 3 kids is not going to be in most cases, not going to be squeezing into a 2-bedroom apartment. So that, the size of the units, if I understand correctly, is sort of, it's going to somewhat constrain the kind of the people who would be attracted to this.
Ray, did you have any follow-up?
Yep, I just want to say, some people may have gotten the wrong idea of what some of the questions I'm asking, and I'm not opposed to this project. I was kind of taken back a little bit that it's not going to be 55 and older, and the reason that I am taken back a little bit is because tax-wise, real estate tax-wise, that affects the town of Grafton in a considerable way, from 55 and up, and now possibly 20-year-old people. Not that there's anything against 20-year-old people, and your daughter's out there. Happy birthday, by the way. But it changes the tax revenue on our end. Again, I'm not opposed to this project. I would love to see it 55 and older. I would love to see a luxury, or whatever it is, senior facility in town. We could use this independent living and a skilled nursing center in town too. I just want to make it clear that I'm not opposed to this, so.
Thank you. And I just want to state too that I'm not opposed to this plan either. I was just calling out narratives that were in the agreement here that talk about that economic impact that's supported, again, and anticipated, that 55 plus. I think it's important that this community create housing that meets the needs of all residents. Primarily, this board has talked at length about affordable units in Grafton, and I know we're actively working several opportunities with other developers and with the Affordable Housing Trust. So stay tuned, I guess, to the community to see how that all plays out in the future. But at this point, with us tonight this is just the 17 and 27 Up Street RFP. If there isn't any other questions from the board, I would like to know if the board would like to entertain a motion at this time.
I move the board vote to award the 17 and 27 Upton Street project to GSX Ventures LLC.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to award the RFP. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
DeFazio, aye.
Mr. Mead?
Mead, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, I.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried 5-0. Thank you very much, Michelle, for coming in tonight. Look forward to working with you further on this project. Congratulations.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Have a great night. Yep, we appreciate it.
Thank you. And next up, we have on our agenda 8 Pine Street deed execution. Does anyone have any questions? This is just pretty straightforward, right?
Yep, it is.
If there's no questions, I'll entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to execute the deed for 8 Pine Street as part of the sale of the property to GSX Ventures LLC.
Second.
Motion made second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
DeFazio, aye.
Mr. Mead?
Mead, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often aye.
Miss Roy?
Roy, I.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Thank you. All right. Last minute, I want to. I appreciate the board's indulgence on this, but this was kind of a more of an immediate need, and we added this to the agenda late. But this is in regards to a refinance of a condominium with affordable housing unit deed restriction. So the lender has reached out to the town and is seeking a motion from the board to authorize in support of the refinancing of this affordable unit located at 21 Craftman Court, Unit 11, South Grafton. Is there any discussion on what is being asked of us tonight? All right, hearing none, I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to authorize the town administrator to send a letter of support for the refinancing of the affordable unit located at 21 Craftsman Court, Unit 11, South Grafton.
Second.
Motion made second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
DeFazio, aye.
Mr. Mead?
Mead, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, I.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Thank you. We get that off to them. I know there's a time.
Yes. Yep, we will do that tomorrow.
Thank you. We don't have any resignations, but tonight we have an appointment for an election worker. I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to appoint Sherilyn Reno as an election worker.
Second.
Motion made second. Any discussion on the appointment? Hearing none. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
DeFazio, aye.
Mr. Mead?
Mead, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, I.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried. We don't have any appointments for town administrator, so tonight we have some new business. This is going to be part of an ongoing process here with regards to select board policies. So first up on our agenda tonight is to look and consider select board annual reappointment policy. This was based on some feedback at our last workshop. Board has had an opportunity to look at this. There's a lot of formatting changes, some modifications. Does anyone have any questions tonight on the proposed select board annual reappointment policy? Ms. Roy.
I wanted to speak to the question about posting in print advertising. I forget where I've seen it in another policy or somewhere about where putting it in the Grafton News, for example, should only be done once a quarter, just to kind of remind everybody what's open. And I think we should stick to that rather than for every opening where we're paying money to advertise it. Stick to digital forms of advertising on social media or the town website when an opening occurs beyond the once a quarter advertising.
Okay.
I'd agree with that. Yep.
Any board members have any objections to that?
Mm-mm.
Just for a point of reference, Evan, I mean, will they still put like appointments like on the board here? Like they'll usually
Oh, yeah.
print them, and there's at least an area where there's a hard copy of that posted
Correct.
here at Town Hall that's accessible to the public.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Is there any other questions on the proposed policy?
I think it's great.
Ms. Roy?
So at one point there was talking about interviewing candidates that have not been on a board or committee before. Rather, does that exclude people who are currently holding the seat? Because I don't necessarily want to exclude anybody that wants to interview.
Do you mean like if they voluntarily wanted to come and talk to the
So-
board?
Yeah, so on timeline for the reappointment process, number 5, it says interviews will be held for candidates who have not previously held a seat on a board or committee. I don't want to exclude the people who have held a seat.
Yeah, so I think the intent there is that we had wanted that if you've never been on a board or committee, we want you to come before the select board before being appointed, so that you could meet them. So we could.
I'll be honest.
But in
I
a
like
couple years down the road, if people forget what the intent was and say, well, it doesn't say anything about if you held a seat, and we don't want to accidentally exclude anybody either.
I think it just options the board if it wishes to include. Okay, so I think the board can make that ultimate decision.
If I may.
Yes, William.
Under timeline for the appointment process, point 4, it says the select board shall hold a workshop in June to interview and appoint interested candidates to the open positions. So that's worded like that so you can interview whoever you deem necessary.
Okay. Colleen, does that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any other questions on the proposed policy? Doreen?
Just one quick one. This is under reappointments number 2. In the event that the applicant is applying for reappointment on multiple committees, they will be asked to prioritize their committee choices. And I'm just, I'm wondering why, I guess, and if this is something that is necessary to do. So I'm speaking for myself and saying that I don't necessarily, I kind of don't want to know what people's priorities are. I want it to be based on the need and their appropriate skills. But I mean, I could take it or leave it, but I just I didn't know if this was necessary to put in a policy. It seems more like a process that we could add in or not, so just questioning it.
So I think the concern was that somebody would, show interest in 5 different boards and committees, and we obviously don't want to appoint them to all of them necessarily, so just how do we gather input to help make that decision?
That's fair, yeah. So just gathering more information if we were to pick only one.
Yeah. So
for example. Okay.
Right. It's like ranked choice.
Yeah. Okay. But that doesn't restrict us from saying, if they said my number 1 choice is Affordable Housing Trust, that doesn't mean that we need to appoint them to that. We may say, oh well, actually, we need you on your 5th choice.
Right, and I think it also serves to help people that are interested in volunteering examine what they're interested in and help internally prioritize those things. So when they turn up to the meeting, they've already sort of thought about what's my level of interest relative to the various things that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
So I think it helps them and it helps us.
Okay.
I think you saw that during the reappointment process with a couple of candidates that had applied for multiple things. And then when they got here and realized there was somebody else that also had that interest, they would say, well, I'll withdraw from that and allow you to have that seat because I'll do this other thing over here. And if we had that numerical scale, you would know that just by looking at the paper, I think.
Great. Thanks for that clarification.
Any other questions, board, comments? All right, if there isn't any other changes, I can entertain a motion to codify this policy.
I move the board vote to accept the select board annual reappointment process as amended during discussion.
Second.
Motion made second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Mead?
Mead, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often, aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, aye.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried. All right, so next up, we
Mr.
have...
Chair?
Yes.
Could I request that we take something out of order?
Sure.
Could we move discussion of GSX building permit up to now? I've asked Chris to stay for that conversation, and I think that's his last discussion point.
Okay. Yeah, Chris.
Not that, no, I'm gonna talk about it, but
I asked him to stay. And
I
then,
wasn't asking you.
okay, just saying. Go ahead,
No,
Chris.
you're
Take
good.
it.
You
Take it
want to
away.
get out of here. I get it. No,
Chris wants
with
to
the
go home.
board's permission, and we're going to take that out of order, please. Yes. So we're going to take discussion GSX building permit letter A out of order.
Okay.
If
Thank
you
you.
would like to go ahead and.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you want to talk about the IT contract. No, you're good. Okay. So, in one of our meetings with GSX regarding 8 Pine Street, we started discussing different fees, and so fairly typical large construction project like this will try to negotiate different fee structures. In this case, a lot of it is driven by increased costs from when the original proposal came out, and now we've got, rising costs due to pandemic or post-pandemic. And so in our conversation, we really focused on the third-party review process with a project this big. So if I'll just go over some of the figures, and then I'll talk about what the ask was. So the current project at 8 Pine is slated to be around $55 million, which puts their building permit somewhere in the neighborhood of $550,000. We require them to use a third-party reviewer, which they pay directly, to do all of that background review. That cost is $350,000 for a total of $900,000. And so what GSX has asked is that they were wondering if we would reduce our permit fee to $250,000 to try to be more in line with what your maybe total project fee would be if they weren't not forced, but if they weren't shouldering that third party review conversation. So we did look into this a little bit. There are cases in which the committee, the board of selectmen, or excuse me, select board here, if the select board would has entertained that reduction in fee. There are other towns that don't do that at all. So from what I can see, a lot of it is dependent on whether you're trying to promote growth, whether you're trying to, you don't need to promote growth because you're in such a hot market, relationship building, all of those types of things. So Chris and I had a conversation earlier today. This is a project that is in our 40R district, which is more dense housing. So the board could consider reduction of or capping the building permit fee at $250,000 for large scale projects in the 40R district, and then avoid the precedent setting to then lose your ability to negotiate with anyone else that comes that's a large scale builder. Or it can choose not to do that at all. That's certainly an option as well. In our meeting with GSX, they requested that. I obviously don't have the authority to do that, and I said I will bring that to the board for consideration. Other data points that we discussed today, the sale of the property will net around $950,000 to the town of Grafton. We are looking at an estimated tax revenue from that property of $922,000 per year. And there's a fee that comes along with 40R or a payment that the state gives you. We estimate that at $950,000 as well, but I want to make clear that that number is our estimate and not from the state. So we could be off maybe for a considerable number. So hold that other number to the side, but those other ones are solid.
Clarify a question here for 1 minute. So I get the local real estate tax revenue of the $950K, but the one that the state, which may or may not, let's not quote a figure.
Yep.
But is that also in perpetuity, or is that a one-time payment?
That's a one-time payment.
Okay. So one of them is the ongoing taxing of commercial and real estate and real property that comes to the town. The other one that you're talking about is
One-time fee.
one-time fee.
Yes, correct.
So the the building permit, excuse me, building permit is $550.
Yes.
They wanted a $250.
Yes.
So I would suggest that and that's based on a value of $55 million.
Yeah, let me back up one, because I think I answered your question incorrectly. So they asked us for 200, but I didn't like that, so I'm here at 250.
just to be clear.
So what
Yeah.
I would propose and what I would look at is, and I've asked this question to other municipalities the exact same way. I would rather see the building permit at 50% of the rate based on the total value of the project on completion. Okay, so we're giving them a break.
Right.
So we're actually giving them a little bit more than that, but 50% of the total. So in other words,
Yeah, I
they pay
understand.
us $250,000 for the building permit, and I'm just throwing this number out.
Right.
And then we get to the end of the project, and the project is now $62 million.
Right.
I want my cut of that.
Right.
Okay.
I have something else I want to add to this. Are they going to be seeking any TIF from the town?
We're
Under their current proposal, there was no TIF that was, but.
I hope not.
Well, wait a minute though. That you see, this is what I'm kind of getting. It's like the cart before the horse.
No. I mean, let's put it this way. And one of the reasons that, and I'm gonna go back to 27 Upton Street, is that I read that proposal and I saw TIF written all over it.
Yep.
And it's not, if you look at that in a sense of new growth, the amount of money that's gonna generate in new growth, it's gonna get wiped out pretty quick, especially if it's not over 55. And families and children and everything that go into these situations. So, I mean, I would not be in favor of a TIF on either one of these projects, but that's just my opinion.
Well, I think that's what we have the TIF committee for too,
Yeah, yeah.
right? I mean, that's for them to make that recommendation, but the reason why I want to be clear is I don't want to be reducing fees and then all of a sudden we're in a scaled, ramp up to 100% full taxing of that, of the real property.
But that's why, in my thought is, when it goes to 62 million, I want my 50% of that too.
Right.
So that's, if we just take it based on the initial construction, that project over there is gonna take probably 2 years to totally complete. So your 55 million today is really gonna be 62 to 64 million by the time you're done. And if we agree to a $250,000 building permit, that's all we're gonna get out of
Right.
that whole thing. So,
if you're asking my input, I like that proposal. I think that's a good way to do it. It doesn't limit us. If the property changes over the course of this building, we're giving them a pretty good rate, 50%
So would
off.
that be just for the 40R district?
I would hold it to that so that you again have another bite at the apple, so to speak, when another proposal like this.
well, when you do it once, somebody else is gonna ask the same question.
That's fair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
oh, no, it is, I'm not saying it.
Yeah.
But again, you wanna get all your money out of the project.
But so their basis for this is that they're bearing costs for that third-party review.
Right.
Is that, are we pretty confident that that is a feature in large developments like this going forward?
For Grafton, I think so, yeah.
Could it potentially go away where?
So no, I don't foresee that in anywhere in the near future us being able to get away from the third party review with a project of this scale, given the staffing that we have.
Okay, I just don't want to hamstring us.
No, and that's one of the reasons why Chris and I discussed today about making it specific that this is in the 40R district, so that we're not hamstringing ourselves with every other big project that comes. You can take them on the eaches.
Yeah.
Because there's some that you'll want to have a negotiation. There's some that don't make economic sense for us to do that, and you want to be able to decide that each time.
So I think it's a great structure.
Yeah, I'm in favor of Ray's recommendation.
Yeah, I like that too.
And again, based on the numbers in their proposal for the center of town, that's why I asked when did those numbers come out, because they're low.
Yeah.
Yeah, for 136 units, at $35 million is low.
So I want to say, I think probably what you're going to want to do is you come back to us with some sort of formal language.
Yep.
But this is where I really feel I'd really like to have a board member, just, to be a part of that. discussion. I don't know how the rest of the board feels about that. To work with the TA, just it's a lot of, it's not really going through the TIF, which we already have set up, but we have there's representation on that. But this is kind of like that. This is a reduction in fees, and I don't know if the board feels about having a rep just work with the TA.
For, I just want clarification for what, the negotiation
Yeah.
of this?
Yes.
Are we authorizing that board member to do anything or just go and listen?
Just to represent us in those discussions. I think it just, to me, it just provides a level of additional representation. I mean, it's our decision to reduce this fee based on the recommendation of the town administrator and the staff. But I when we get into these types of situations, this is a big project.
Right.
So
That representative can't make a decision.
make a decision.
Without bringing it back to the board anyway, so it's.
So I don't really view this as this piece that we're talking about now is really a negotiation. We're talking about a structural change to our fee structure, and that would apply to a district. When we tell the developer this is our fee structure, you're going to have to take these costs. That's what it is. So I don't see that there's going to be negotiation necessarily with the developers. I think if we're looking at the proposed structure, we're talking about 225. I think if they're at that 55 million, which Ray thinks will be higher at, so we're substantially meeting their ask at this point. So I don't know necessarily that we would be wanting to negotiate that.
I just bring that up as a discussion. I mean, could there be negotiation?
Well, in my opinion, I would rather have the town administrator do his job separate from the board and have, him go back with what we've just discussed. And if there was ever a negotiation, Evan's going to bring it back for the whole board to have another discussion. Otherwise, it's done, right?
Colleen,
It would be the 250 plus 50% of the total value.
At the end of
So
the
if the
project.
value, if the value is based on 55
So,
million,
t-
if
250
it goes to 60,
right.
62 million, we still get 50% of that 62.
Right, it's no less than 250,000
Correct, yeah.
plus 50% of any value over that.
Correct.
Got it.
However, the final wording is, which I'll work with council on that.
Okay. Colleen, did you have any questions?
No, I think Evan has a good handle on what the board would like to see happen. I'm not sure if there needs to be any additional representation at this time for this part of the process.
Okay. All right. So you're gonna bring this forward to our August 3rd meeting?
Yep.
For some language, and you'll have council propose and.
What I anticipated is that I'll have the proposed language and the conversation with the developer that this is what we're doing.
Okay.
If there's any issues, I'll bring that back to you. Otherwise, it'll just be ready for you to vote or not vote, whatever you choose to do.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
All right, I appreciate that. Any other questions or comments on the board? All right. I can't say
Good
if
night,
you're feeling
Chris.
clear to go. Maybe Evan can. Yeah, so.
Nice to
But thank
see
you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking that out of order, everyone.
Thanks.
All right, so we're gonna return back to 5 new business. This is IT support services contract. Evan?
Sorry. Do you want to take one other thing out of order? We have not on this agenda. We have that H 2198 conversation. That is the wetlands,
Yes.
and so Chris is involved with the conservation and wetland stuff.
Okay, so
Maybe
ladies and
before
gentlemen,
we kick him
there
loose.
there is a pending decision in a time frame here, and very rarely, I know, this does come up, but there is only a certain window for public input with the state legislator. I was notified of this morning, and we're looking for additional support for making or supporting recommendations and changes on certain Mass General Law where it comes to 40Bs and wetland encroachment. So if it's with the board's permission, does anyone have any objections of bringing this up tonight?
So we're bringing it up as an emergency item?
Yes.
So I move to bring it up as an emergency item.
Second.
I have a motion made and seconded to bring up as an emergency item. This is called the. just give me
An
a formal
act relative to the protection of wetlands and water resources in Chapter 40B applications.
Thank you. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
DeFazio, aye.
Mr. Mead?
Mead eye.
Mr. Often?
Often aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, I.
Carlson, aye. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
All right, so we received correspondence, actually from a number of sources, requesting that the board support or not support, I guess, depending on its view, a bill called H2198, which I just had read, an act relative to protection of wetlands and water resources in Chapter 40B applications. So, to break this down into layman's terms, the Chapter 40B allows for housing to be built in areas and then exempted from local zoning and local bylaw implementation. That's done by a granting of a waiver. However, if you're under the 10% of affordable housing units as set by the statute, what typically happens is if you deny that 40B application, it's then deemed by housing court as inconsistent with local needs. So basically then the 40B is granted and they can build them in that wetland area. And so what the H2198 seeks to do is push that back to the towns as a local decision, overseen by, the way we're reading it, overseen by the Conservation Commission. So that if at any point we deny a 40B application based on wetlands and wetlands encroachment, we would have a leg to stand on in court as opposed to now just being found to be inconsistent with the local needs. And so in speaking with Chris and with Leah, it's not that big of an issue here. The Conservation Commission and ZBA work very well together and hand in hand, and it seems like concessions and negotiation and input is taken seriously. But I know in other communities, from my reading today, because I also did a little cramming before this, that it is an issue, and where they're doing some pretty large developments in some pretty wet areas without, maintaining buffer and all the rest of it. So, so again, the request is that the board vote to support the passage of H2198. We would then, if you did that, we will then submit that support letter electronically via the mechanism called out for in their request for response.
Thank you. Does the board have any questions?
Nope.
Okay, and just remind everyone, when's the due date for final submissions?
The 27th of July.
All right. Does anybody have any questions with regards to this, what is being asked, letter of support?
So, Evan, would you draft that on our behalf?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. You want to take the motion?
Yes.
Chris, will you draft that on my behalf?
Chris, you
Ask
didn't turn to
William.
me.
I was gonna say, what about Will? I mean,
How about,
So-
you guys can work on it together.
I move the board authorize the town administrator to write a letter of support on behalf of the board and submit the letter by email to our state representative and reviewing committee for the proposed wetlands bill H.2198.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? All right, hearing none. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
DeFazio, aye.
Mr. Mead?
Mead eye.
Mr. Often?
Often aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, I.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Thank you very much for bringing that up tonight. Thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Yeah,
I think it's
thank you.
important that we support this, so we appreciate it. With your permission, Mr. Town Administrator, can I go to number 5, new business, section B, IT support services and contracts?
Absolutely.
Good night, Chris.
It's good for
Well, you
Chris.
can.
Chris, I was kidding. I'll work on that. Okay.
Okay.
I was just busting you.
So what we have in front of us tonight, Evan, do you want to kind of give us an update?
So yeah, you don't have anything to vote on tonight because we're in a little bit of a free fall for the moment. We're scrambling a little bit. We had put out an RFP. Every 3 years, we go out and solicit new IT support and services. We received a low bid, which was substantially lower than our current vendor, and really can't ignore that, and there was no real reason to. They were responsive. So we awarded that contract, and they subsequently backed out. We then re-awarded the contract to our current vendor, who also subsequently backed out. And so now we've been working with another vendor who did remote mapping of the network today and is coming in for on-site service or on-site meeting tomorrow for a few hours. And then, so I would anticipate that we won't have an actual document for you to vote and sign until the 3rd. But we are going to be moving along to make sure that we don't have any gaps in coverage.
So do we need to go through an RFP process again, or how's that?
So, given the responsive bidders and their pricing, and the pricing that we're looking at currently, I would say no. I think that we have a viable reason not to go back out to bid.
Okay.
So, I also don't think we want to sit another. It would be another 2 months.
Yeah.
And our gap in that window would be substantial.
Okay.
And I don't want to leave the town exposed for that. So, and it also depends on how we work up this contract, whether we do a lump sum or is it, fee for service, however that winds up being, I think makes a difference as well. So we'll be working on that.
Got it.
But I really would prefer not to delay us that far, and that would make me very nervous.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board?
I just have one more for Evan. So is the IG's office notified of this situation, or just in terms of procurement in this situation like this, do we have to notify them that we're not going back out to bid and the reasons why? Or I just don't want to be caught off guard.
Right. I don't believe so.
I don't believe so either. We'll put something in the procurement folder for this RFP, but based on the money we have budgeted and the cost projection for this project, we're under the threshold for soliciting 3 quotes under 30B procurement law.
Perfect. Okay.
So I think that we're well covered in this.
Great. Thank you.
It was very articulate. I
Those
appreciate
classes
that.
are paying off.
They really are. They really are.
You like your procurement classes?
I do. I've
Yeah.
just got to take the test, and then I'm a certified.
Awesome.
All of it.
Great. Thank you.
A certified olive.
Certified all of it. Lost it halfway through.
I know.
That's why you shouldn't let me talk that long.
I'm going to put that on your door.
You get a raise for
Certified
being
olive.
all of it?
Yeah.
No,
No?
no. He drives a
I
hard
said-
bargain.
I just said yes, and so now you don't get it.
So now, if there's any tasks or activities that don't have a place to live,
Right. Go to the certified olive.
go to
Yeah,
the
right.
Olivet guy.
Yeah.
We're actually going to get a new name placard printed. Certified
Certified
all of it. William Blake.
It's more than more certifiable.
It's gonna stick. Keep saying it.
That's right.
Okay.
Oh, it's
Thank
already-
you, guys.
it's already-
Real quick, so you'll bring something back forward to us. What do you think on the 3rd? We can look forward to seeing something
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
proposed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. Next up here, some additional policy review. One to consider tonight is placement of items on the select board agenda. We've all seen this in the packet proposed to us. Does any of the board members have any questions on? Let's see here, administrative policy number 85. Colleen.
Were we going to be taking care of the policy numbers on this one? Because I see it's still 85 here. Like, is this going to be one? I know Evan wanted to renumber them.
I think
Let's leave off. Let's leave off. Ooh, echo. Let's leave off policy number 85. So I guess how you number them or put a table of contents together, Colleen. I don't know how you feel about this. It's
I personally, I think if you vote at a later date to adopt your rules and procedures, that is number one, and then however you choose to number the rest is kind of inconsequential. I envision it as having sections, right? General government, finance, procurement, and doing it that way, and then just kind of ordering them in the number or the order in which we take them. I don't know that it, unless you see there being a hierarchy or anybody sees there being a need for a hierarchy.
No, I like that idea too. I just didn't know because we're voting on it tonight and it has number 85. Should we just get rid of 85 and all the other numbers tonight?
all right. That's a good point. Let's just remove
Yes.
policy number 85 and not be part of considered
Understood.
for any action on this policy tonight. Any other questions on the policy as it's outlined for placement of items on select board agenda? Okay, so we're good to approve that. Do you want to do these in individual motions, or do you want to just do the ones we want to approve tonight and all in one motion? What's the board like to do? Okay, great. Let's move on to the next one, Select Board Operational Policy. Does anyone have any questions on that one that is proposed? Okay, seeing, hearing, silence. Moving on to the next one, televising boards and committees. So I just have one question.
Absolutely.
This policy might have been drafted before we had 3 active channels, public, government, and educational.
Mhm.
2 of which are controlled by governing boards of the community. One government channel, the government, and the educational channel by the school department. On the prioritization of the order in which to do this, I kind of saw the school committee listed as second. I mean, they've got their own channel. They wanted to utilize that.
Yeah, we could make that, A is select board / school committee. The only reason we even included a hierarchy is so that there is a definitive way that has nothing to do with personality, anything else of who gets a room and when, right? This is just a defined hierarchy of what the town sees as important to make sure is broadcast out to the public.
Okay.
In a perfect world, we're going to capture all of these, but if there is a conflict, who wins without it being subjective.
And we only have limited staffing to operate the equipment.
So I would, if you want to make a change there, I would suggest maybe select board / school committee so that they're on the same level and they have obviously access to their things, or just remove school committee altogether, and as they're not really a town side of the house board.
They have their own governing rules and regulations. We have really no authority over how they govern. The only thing we do is if there's a vacancy, we appoint somebody to fill the vacancy. Colleen?
I don't think this is really trying to say that they can or can't film. What this is going to do is help support GCTV when they only have limited number of rooms that can record or limited staff to record. I think that's what this is really saying, not that they don't have their own channel and that they won't be able to record, but if, like Evan was saying, it's going to be who gets to compete for the rooms. And then my other question is, have we gotten the owls yet? And on any given night, how many committees could meet and successfully be recorded between the owls, the TVs, GCTV studio, and wherever else that they could possibly be recorded?
It would be, so here in the municipal center, it would be 4. If you add the GCTV studio, it would be 5, I would anticipate.
6. There's 2 studios here in the municipal center, and there's 4 of these devices. That'd be a total of 6, right?
I was thinking 1 at GCTV and 4 here.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. No. What am I missing? There's 2 studios here.
So there's A and F here. We have 2 owls, 1 GCTV.
Oh, I see. Okay.
That's how I'm doing it, unless I'm missing something.
So there's 4 here.
4 here.
Gotcha.
1 including GCTV.
Thank you. Okay. I understand. Okay.
And when committees are reaching out to schedule meetings, these are all being offered to them so that we're getting everything captured as much as we can?
With the exception of the owls. So the owls are delayed with the IT vendor issue.
Okay.
I had to pause that for a moment, but it shouldn't be too much longer.
Okay.
The procurement of the units is not the problem. It's the setup and kind of developing the, making sure that that laptop only does that, that kind of stuff, so we don't have any security issues.
Okay. Any other questions, concerns? Yes.
Just one other question. So does this policy include workshops, or is it just business meetings? Because we voted about a month ago to do workshops offline, I think.
We never
sometime.
voted on that. That was never voted on. It was discussed.
We didn't vote?
No, we didn't vote on that.
Oh,
We
I
voted
thought
to
we
do
did.
We
off-site.
talked about it.
We talked
Okay.
about doing off-site meetings, but then there's the logistics of, again, taping those. So we
Right.
haven't crossed that bridge yet, but yeah.
Okay, so that is, are we talking about that with this policy, or
I would
doing
like
it
to.
separately? You would
I
like
definitely
to?
would like to talk about it.
Okay.
I'd like to see some language in where that gives the chair some leverage and discretion, basically, to determine if having a particular meeting on video could potentially be detrimental to the success of the meeting. And because I feel pretty passionately about the workshop situation, that I understand the need for visibility and transparency with the meetings, but I also feel like the highest kind of priority should be creating the right conditions for a successful meeting, and that might or might not include having them on television, I guess is the way that I would characterize it. So providing some language which would give a chair some discretion on that, I think I'd like to see that. This to me feels like very much a kind of one size fits all, and I don't know if that's necessarily true when it comes to meeting facilitation. I do lots of different kinds of meetings in my professional context, and they all have different requirements in terms of how individual meeting participants collaborate, and being on video has a substantial impact in some cases to the success of that collaboration.
Okay, I have some thoughts, but Colleen, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Matt, but I really couldn't disagree more. I want to participate in all meetings that can be recorded as much as possible, and that includes workshops for just the record and to remember what was said and to go back and to review them. And I do think it's a slippery slope if we start putting in language to allow committees not to record. Then every other committee is going to start calling any other meeting a workshop when they just don't want to be held accountable or any kind of record keeping beyond minutes. And we know minutes can sometimes not be as detailed as we're looking for when we're researching things. So for me, I would be absolutely against any language that says any kind of meeting could be not recorded, especially for, the select board or any of these committees that are listed.
So if I can just respond to that, I guess. Yeah, I think it's just a difference in philosophy. I think the public have access to the meetings. They can always turn up to those meetings. We have meeting minutes. They have the transparency that they need, that we're required to provide. I just think that this is too rigid of a policy for me. So I would look to add a little bit of language. I understand the slippery slope thing, and I'm not sure exactly how to address that, but I do think it's important that we provide some latitude for the chairs.
I think we address it by not including it. That's how we address it.
Mr. Chair, can I?
Yeah, sure.
So I don't want to be a wet blanket on your conversation, but I don't think that that's this policy. This policy prioritizes the usage of the resources that we have available and tries to maximize those. If the board wants to have a policy by where it exempts certain meetings from things, I would think you would create a different policy that addresses that on its own. In whatever format you wind up taking for that, but I don't think that, I would recommend against adding it to this particular policy. This is just dictating what rooms and, who has access and in what order.
Logistical resources for recording and going live for meetings.
Right. So, again, I don't want to be a wet blanket on your conversation, but I think that's a different document.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Yes.
Can I just add on? So, and that's the reason why I had asked the question, because it seems to me, and Evan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're doing this in order of priority. So this was a priority policy, and I didn't know if it seemed like it was a priority policy because it was a discussion that was brought up. And I read the policy as, I should say, I don't read the policy like this now, but the original policy was written in terms of business meetings and not necessarily workshops, because for a long time, workshops were not recorded for the purposes that Matt brought up, which I fully agree with. So I just want to make sure, as we're moving forward and we are putting policies in place, that this has nothing to do with workshop meetings if we decide to have the discussion further.
Right. So this is merely the logistics of the town feels it's important to give as much transparency as possible, and that all boards and committees should have access to being recorded and televised whenever possible within the limited resources that we have. So that's what this does. This creates, one, that's kind of the mission, and two, that this is the hierarchy if there's a conflict.
But what this does not say is we have to record every meeting.
No, it just says, so it is the policy of the select board that boards and committees will be televised in order to provide greater transparency in the operations of local government. I think if you wanted to carve out an exemption to that, I really think that you would put that somewhere else. Workshop policy, something like that.
Okay.
I want to move that off that table on this discussion. I agree with you. So we can bring that up in a future meeting and discussion and have further conversation on it. Okay, and we can debate the merits of that and and determine what our steps are. But for now, this is just to your point. Is there any comments that anyone has on just this component of what this policy is defining for use of resources in logistics? Colleen.
So I don't know if anybody remembers, but when this policy was first adopted, it was only 2014. And I believe it came about because meetings were not being recorded, workshop or otherwise, and people were recording it on their phones. And that created a narrative or didn't give a full picture. And that's why this policy came about, because it is truly important to record all meetings, workshops, or otherwise. Because this policy isn't that old. And
Yeah, I'm just looking at this policy in front of me here. So I guess to your point, why this came about, it's fine. I'm trying to get the committee to, is there any structural input that the committee wants to put any more on this policy tonight and consider it for adoption? That's what I want to know. Okay.
Take a motion.
1 minute. I did skip over 1.3, remote participation. Very important one. Colleen can attest. Okay. Which was on the previous page. Is there any questions or comments from the board with regards to remote participation? So this isn't about COVID emergencies. This is about the quorum. We can meet in person, but one or I believe two people could, because
As long as the chair
quorum
is present.
and the chair is present.
Chair is present.
Great.
Chair or vice chair?
I think that if you are going to not have the chair present, you have to vote to make somebody acting chair.
Okay. All right. So does anyone have any comments on the remote participation? Okay. I can now accept the motion.
So I move the board vote to approve the revisions in the following policies as amended during discussion. The placement of items on the select board agenda, the select board's operational policy, the remote participation policy, and the televising boards and committees policy.
Second.
Motion made second. Any discussion on that motion? All right. Hearing none. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Mead?
Need I?
Mr. Often?
Off tonight.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, aye.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Thank you very much. We'll be bringing some more up at the next meeting under discussion to consider if the board wants to move forward with the next sets of policies. Thank you very much, Evan and William, for bringing those forward. Thank you, everyone.
Mostly
for your,
William.
Thank you for your feedback, and it did add another agenda item that we'll bring up in a future meeting. Next up, does anyone have any select board reports that they would like to discuss? No. Okay, moving on. TA reports.
Yes, thank you. I have a few things. First, I wanted to give an update on the fire chief search. So we do have active advertisements, and we have, I believe, 6 or 9. I believe it's 6 applications so far. I just put them on our Google Drive for the committee to review today, and so we should have a pretty good turnout, I think, as far as number of applicants that we get in our pool. That closes in another 3 weeks ish. I wanted to give an update on the town report. So if you recall, the town report omitted the salaries of school department employees. So we have a corrected list that will be posted tomorrow as an addenda to the annual town report that now captures all of the data on one list.
Okay.
And then finally, I wanted to address the library carpet. I don't want to call it an issue. The library carpet narrative on online right now. So there is some concern over the library pattern and color in the children's/teen areas. So they are two different color patterns, but the same geometric pattern. And so the concern is that it will cause some folks with autism or epilepsy to either have seizures or to find it unpleasant and cause other sensory issues. So we are looking into that. We are going to meet with the Disability Commission and try to have a broader conversation about what the remedy for that would look like. And in the meantime, we're going to keep the library opening on schedule because there's other fiscal ramifications of not doing that. And then we're going to look and see what we can come up for a potential solution. I did spend some time reading through articles yesterday, last night, and there is some data that suggests that the geometric pattern could in theory trigger someone with epilepsy, although it would be about 5% of the people with epilepsy. So it's a condition on the rarer side even with epilepsy. With autism, it's mixed because some folks with autism find that busy, colorful pattern to be not unpleasant. I don't know if I'd say pleasant, but not unpleasant. So when you build a sensory room, generally they're muted because you're trying to create a calm environment, but there's also times when you want to create a stimulating environment, and this certainly does that. So I was going to make a joke about being the same carpet as my living room, but I didn't think anybody would believe that. But we are working on that discussion, and so I'll bring that back to you when we get somewhere.
So is there a lesson to be learned here in terms of involvement with, so Disability Commission has regularly checked in on the progress, and I know that Christy Proctor has been somewhat closely following the progress of things. I just wonder if we missed a trick somehow in the choosing of some of the finished materials like the carpet. It seems it's unfortunate that we got to this stage.
Perhaps. I think this is a potentially difficult problem to solve or to catch in the discussion because, most of these building projects, you focus on your ADA accessibility, and this project has that in spades, no doubt. When you start looking at, these color choices and carpets, these are commercially available carpets. We did not spec this specific to Grafton Library, right? These exist out there in the marketplace. And so, it's hard to catch every single thing that could be a barrier to every single person with the uniqueness that we see with the amount of people that may be visiting that building. I think that's very hard to do. I think that that it is unfortunate that it's caught now, or that the narrative, the discussion is happening now. I think that it would be a potentially easy problem to fix before we picked and glued down that carpet. Just for reference, I spent 5 years as an advocate for people with developmental disabilities. I was a human rights officer. I helped build group homes to move people out of institutions into the community. My wife has a master's in autism. She works with kids with autism. This is not something that was really apparent to either of us as something to be aware of. Even my wife, doing this work every single day, has had no contact with anyone that has real sensory issues with color and shape. So not to say that it doesn't exist. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying it's not one of the things that's at the forefront.
Well, that's the challenge with sort of the focus on ADA, right? So as a member of that commission, that's what I focused on.
Right.
So I had some back and forth with the OPM and to just looking at all the language in the contracts, and it was pretty buttoned down in terms of making sure that we were compliant that way.
Well, if you read the comments, this is the hard part, is that there's folks that are saying, I can't go there with my child because the pattern is too busy and will cause them difficulties. And then there's other people saying, I have disabilities and I find this to be very pleasing. So it becomes, it's difficult. So I think lessons learned, would be try to cast a wider net with these choices. But, people's involvement in the public process, as we know, is minimal. Right? It's hard to generate people's interest in it. And so finding a way to put this in front of people more so that we have more voices to tell us, I think that you might have an issue there. I think that's the lesson to me.
While trying to weed out, the people that just say, well, that's ugly.
Right.
Ugly or not ugly is not the issue here.
Right.
Well, the interior designer should pick up on all of this stuff.
Right.
So, for example, that carpet up there is not conducive to a person who has Alzheimer's. Not at all. It would really bother them. But that's part of the architectural team and the interior designers. They should be picking up on all of this stuff. So.
Yeah, but children's part of the library. And to your point, Alzheimer's. What's the rate
No,
of Alzheimer's
I'm not.
children?
I'm not saying that Alzheimer's. I'm saying that carpet itself.
Yeah.
In an Alzheimer's unit.
It would exist.
No,
Yeah.
not at all.
Right.
But that's part of the interior designers.
Right.
Requirement to make sure that all of that's checked.
It's all suitable.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I'm confident that, working with the commission, I think this is going to be a fairly straightforward remediation. I think once you get this, the stacks in there and, all the
Right.
chairs and the furniture and everything else, it's going to break that pattern up substantially. So, maybe it's some other area carpets or whatever.
Yep.
It's really a nice carpet.
Yeah.
I like it.
Mm.
It looks great.
No, I think it's a very fun pattern for the children's area, and I think it complements the other furniture and the stacks, and they have this fake tree thing in there, and they got a lot of really cool stuff. So I guess the takeaway from me bringing this up is that, we're going to all work together and try to come up with a collaborative solution that is both economical and, to the satisfaction of as many people as we can satisfy.
Can I just add on or kind of answer Matt's question a little bit too? I spoke to Roger Trahan today too, just to kind of get some feedback from him. And so two things, I was asking about the timeline just because I sit on the library committee, and this is the interior design is a subcommittee of the library committee, and which is where the architect met. There was no one assigned, because remember, Disabilities Commission is relatively new. We reappointed them. So Christy wasn't even added on as part of the library project until these decisions were made.
I see.
So there's one sort of misstep if we were to look back and say, how can we do this better? And the second thing is, my question to Roger was, where is the guidance on this? So one, this doesn't happen again, but like, how do we improve the situation, and where is the guidance to it? And there is none.
Right.
And so, part of it is you just take it case by case basis, and this has been brought up, and we're going to come up with a solution. But there's ADA compliance, there's all the building codes, there's the fire codes, everything that this whole committee has done for years, and there was no guidance around this. So I think it's just an opportunity for us to look at the project and say, what can we do? And and someone brought up actually to Peter and I in the parking lot tonight of doing a sensory space, which is what they do in some schools, is just like create a part of the room made for children who can't handle the carpet or can't handle noise, period. Right? Because that's going to be also not just sensory of the colors, but of the light, the noise, activities going on as well. So it might be a good add-on. And my question to you is the building committee involved in the conversation? Or is it just Disabilities Commission at this point? I know the committee will meet sooner than later to discuss it, and I would like to see at least the chair of that committee involved in the conversations as well.
Certainly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know Andy too will be part of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And so we had met up at the library, and Ray, Beth, Andy, myself, William, to kind of look at the space and figure out next step, and also exclude what options really aren't available at this current time.
Yeah.
You know, so that we don't give anyone in the community a disingenuous answer to a problem that we can't fix. You know, I'm not going to tell people we're going to rip the carpet out. You know, that isn't really an option for today. And so how do we, what then, okay, so that's gone. What's next step two?
Right.
That's what we're looking at. You know, we talked about runners, but now you're adding carpet on top of carpet. Now you have an actual ADA problem.
Right.
With accessibility, so that's not a good option. You know, we have to go down this road and find a solution that is agreeable to as many people as we can.
Okay. And actually, I take that back too. The chair doesn't necessarily have to be involved, because I forget Andy is part of our committee, and as long as there's some representation for the library
And I
building committee.
I think we're going to try to communicate as much as possible.
Yeah.
You know, we'll get that. But between Beth and Andy having
Yeah,
such
and
close
Beth too,
contact with them.
obviously. Yeah. Good.
So yeah, that was it for TA reports.
Thank you, Evan, very much for that. We look forward to hearing some updates in the development of what are the next courses of action. So next up, we have correspondence regarding George Hill Road, and I think this is pretty important. One of the members, Colleen, had asked me to place this on here so that we would talk directly about this, about the condition of George Hill Road, but I'm going to allow us to discuss that part, and Colleen, I'll let you have the floor, and you can bring up your primary concerns.
So the board received correspondence from Ms. Penny Adams, and this actually made it in the packet back on June 15th, and I think we all kind of missed it. So I asked to bring it back because this is an important conversation that we should be having, and it is an important project that is going to cost a lot of money to accomplish. So we need to start having those conversations on how we're going to accomplish it. So I know Evan is working with Mr. Knoyer to kind of come up with the best idea of what that plan would look like. I know CIPC, when it went through its ranking process this year, engineering for George Hill Road did make it on the list and did make the cut. However, CIPC recommended against funding it this year because we weren't sure if we would be able to pay for the project afterwards. I see you guys smiling. Am I doing something wrong?
No.
Someone was. It's fine.
Go ahead, Colleen.
It has nothing to do with you.
All right, no, but that's all I really had. So if Evan wants to speak more to it, that would be good.
Sure. So I spent quite a bit of time on George Hill Road in the last 2 weeks. I just want to point out that in Munson that would just be a road. It was like
That's the main highway.
kind of. I was like,
That would just be a
I was like, oh, well, this is just what I drive to get here. No, it definitely, you know, everyone agrees that it needs to be redone. It's country drainage. There's culverts failing. You know, it's time. So in meeting with Mr. Knoyer, it looks to be about a $5 million project to remove the infrastructure that's there, put in the proper storm drainage, carry the water away like it should be. There would be a substantial easement portion of that project. We'd have to do some temporary easements and some permanent easements along both sides of the road, since our public way there, the taking on either side is very narrow. We talked about putting this forward in the fall, potentially, as a authorization to borrow. The background would have to be, not the background, the necessary question that would need to be answered is, where does the money come from to fund that note, which would likely be a 20-year note given the amount of money we're talking about. And really the only two logistical places to pull that from would either be Chapter 90, which I would recommend against, because I'd want to keep that money local. And so then the other place would be to earmark the override, that $1.5 million, to reduce what is available each year.
Okay, so this question was brought up years ago about leveraging that 1.5 million per year and potentially going out and borrowing multi-millions of dollars and then using that, doing a whole bunch of roads at once. And I believe the town was told that it couldn't do that with that money. Now that was back in 2014. And hearing this option today, it's encouraging because it's already there. and you earmark a portion of it to your point, but tell us why we can use it, because right now I'm sitting here, I was heard clear, no, you couldn't do that. You couldn't utilize that 1.5 million for debt exclusion.
Well, no, you can't.
It's not a debt exclusion, no, it's a bond. That
Right.
you're using to fix
I'm
a
sorry,
road.
you couldn't use that 1.5 million to pay for a debt, not a debt exclusion, sorry.
No,
For a
no.
bond, why not? It's road stabilization.
I don't think you can do that. But I don't think you can do that. But anyway.
I would like to know how you do it, that's all.
So,
I'm
the
on
thing is,
board.
it's a $5 million project. We don't want this thing to carry on forever and ever and ever, amen. We want this thing to go away. So the best thing to do is go to a debt exclusion to get it done and borrow it over 10 years and be done with it. And it's done. And it's as simple as that. Yeah, I mean,
But-
you're gonna have to go for design money first.
That's included in that.
Because you're not gonna have a final number. You're not gonna have a final number until the design's done.
We would do not to exceed $5 million.
So what if that doesn't do the project?
So in Paul's estimate, that's what's
See,
necessary.
what my suggestion would be is that you go for design first. And the design's gonna take a year. And that will include the takings and the easements, all of the conservation and everything that goes along with that. And then you put a number to it, and then you go to bond, you go to debt exclusion to get it done.
We've used chapter 90 money in the past for design work.
You can use chapter 90 money for design work, yes.
So if we don't have to, I'm not in support of doing a debt exclusion. The
Right.
reason that we put the road stabilization money in that override was to take care of the roads. So now we're saying that we're gonna increase our taxes again to do an individual road. That just doesn't.
Well, the 1.5 million was to refurbish roads. This is a full rebuild of George Hill.
I understand.
Which
but-
is far above the refurbishment that you see that's going on now. The grinding, the resetting of the basins and repaving. That was the 1.5 million.
I don't agree with that, but I'm still fixed on, I would not be in favor of doing a debt exclusion
Colleen,
if we have another option.
If we used the road stabilization, the 1.5 million, are we allowed to collect that for, let's say, 3 years and do no other roads? So then we have a pot of, $4.5 million and then just do George Hill with that? Are we allowed to do that? And then what would that look like to the road stabilization projects and all those roads that we push off for 3 years? Can they handle a
No.
3-year wait? Or we're
No.
not allowed to do that?
No. So you have to keep your asphalt management plan moving forward. You can't just hit pause on asphalt management, because then we're going to be back here in 5 years talking about why nothing's been done, because we put all our eggs just on this one road, which isn't the most highly traveled road, to be honest, in the town of Grafton. And so the reason that I'm looking to leverage the money we have is that I felt that I pretty clearly heard from the board when I started that we don't want to be doing more debt exclusions and overrides, and we want to stay within the means we have. But I also have to manage the fact that we have decreasing capacity in the budget, and we have all these other goals that we're tasked with meeting. And so we're trying to do the best of both worlds. And I think that the only way you're going to be able to do that, in my opinion, if we're talking about a $5 million project, is to leverage the funds that we have and spread it out over a certain amount of time.
so if you were to take 300,000 a year over 20 years, that would pay for that 5 million upfront because you'd be bonding it for 20 years. That would, that is what you're proposing as an option.
Yep. Or against your chapter 90, if there's some reason that you can't do that against the override, which I've never thought to be the case.
It
but,
should be examined, that's all.
yeah, no, and I will do that. Mary and I will work on that. But it was my understanding that we could.
So what's the implication to the pavement management plan if we take 300 grand, for example? I don't know how much the actual payment is. That's for the next 20 years, right?
Well, yeah, and it taxes that, right? So it, no pun intended, it puts a burden on that because you're also adding things in like the increased amount of sidewalks we want to see happen, walkability, you know, kind of that complete streets model. One thing that Chris McGoldrick will be bringing in front of you is the adoption of complete streets in Grafton. It opens us up to more grant opportunities to maybe roll this stuff together. You know, we're trying to look at this as holistically as possible and not, you know, tank the asphalt management plan for the benefit or for the to fix one road in the whole town. And so we're gonna have to figure out how to do that.
Is the 5 million for the entire road? All
Yes.
of George Hill?
Yes, and then what they would also do is probably like Leland and some of the other streets in that general area, so that you're completing a section of town and then moving on to another one.
Right, right. And that's what I was thinking of
Soap
too.
Hill's
Because
actually in pretty relatively good shape.
Is it?
But so that's my next question is, how
It's
many
not
other
the
George
gravel
Hills
road
do
it
you
used
have
to
up
be.
there?
right.
Because this will work for this one road, but it's
This
obviously.
so right, and I don't want to speak to it too much without Paul's input. I mean, he's obviously the expert, him and Kevin on roads. You know, from my reading of the asphalt management plan, I mean, I think George Hill is definitely the pinnacle of where we want to focus if we're going to do a major rebuild like this. Because of the grade and the amount of water that it takes and the country drainage, you know, you really you can't band-aid it. If we milled it and topped it and fixed the country drainage, you'd be back here in 10 years. It would kind of be money thrown down the drain.
That's what we did at Upton Road.
Right.
So
We-
when
and
the
we-
road was done, they didn't redesign that road. It has no drainage in it whatsoever. And in about 10, 15 years, it's going to be like it was 3 years ago before they did anything. It's nice, don't get me wrong. It's still in relatively good condition, but you can start seeing cracks. You can start seeing where the edges are starting to fall apart after they chip sealed it last year. I agree. Like that's like throwing really good money at a
Yeah.
Right. There's other roads like Leland you wouldn't do as comprehensive of a drainage system because the country drainage there works. The grade is not super steep. It's a countryish road. You'll fix it, pave it, you know, level it, and you'll get some longevity out of that road because of the pitch. You know, with George Hill, there's some pretty significant slope there that has to be contended with, and the water picks up speed and undermines everything that it comes up against. So
And Fay Mountain too, right? That's all connected.
I gotta be honest with you, I don't know that one.
Oh, so if you were turning from, I think it's either Merriam or Meadowbrook, and you're
Okay. Yep.
and you would take a right to George Hill, a left is Fay Mountain. It's only like 3 houses, but I think all the water runs down. There's been issues on that road too in the
it's been
past.
underwater.
Yeah.
Colleen, did you have a question?
So this is listed under correspondence right now with the only supporting documentation we have is Mrs. Adams' email. Can we bring this back under a discussion item where Mr. Knoyer could attend with some more supporting documentation so we could have a more robust conversation about this?
Are you saying our conversation's not robust enough right now, Colleen?
I just didn't get to use it yet. That was the first time we used it tonight, so I had to fit it in. But also that I think it would be
Colleen, I
better if we brought it back.
I completely agree.
I'm on vacation. I'd like to get this moving, so if we could, you know.
No, I still got like 5 things I want to go over in correspondence. No, I'm just kidding. No, I agree. So let's bring this back to meeting. Is August 3rd going to be too soon, you believe?
I'll reach out to Paul and
we'll work on it. We'll work on that and
Can we
we'll put
also
that.
have some analysis around the funding options?
Yes.
Yes, I'll do that this
And
time.
and if Paul, I don't know if August 3rd is too soon to bring this forward, but I'd also be interested in, because George Hill is a long road, right? So is there an assessment that can be done for the slope part of the, you know, of the street? Like, I'd like to know every option. Like,
Right.
could we break down this project instead of 5 million, it's 2 million, and we do, you know, the most important portion of it, or does that not make sense? and we have to do the
In my
whole thing?
conversation with Paul, that doesn't make sense
Okay.
because there's no stormwater infrastructure, so it's not like you can fix a section and then fix another section because there's nothing to tie into.
Yeah,
Right?
that's
You
not-
need
that's
you need
not-
you need
no
to
way that's going to work.
you need a complete run to do. That's why this is such a hindrance.
Yeah.
hindering project. Sorry, I mean,
It's-
stop.
We're probably just gonna cover this, a lot of this all over again on either on the 3rd, or maybe we bring this to the 10th as a workshop.
Yep.
That might be more appropriate. We can concentrate more dedicated time on that.
We're also going to be dealing with this at our capital summit that's coming up in August. So,
Okay.
you know, this will be bandied around quite a bit.
And it would also maybe be nice to invite Penny Adams to the discussion if she wanted to come.
If, here's my opinion on that, okay? If that's the case, then you're gonna invite everyone on Georgia Road.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
let's not
invite
do
all
that.
of us.
Turn it-
I
Yeah.
want this to just be our discussion about what is our plan, working with our staff, and then it, ultimately comes up to us to then present the town meeting, and then they get that, then they can debate that on the floor, and then, it'll be Jen's.
Yes, have them yell at the moderator.
Okay, let's do that. Let's bring that to a future meeting. Thank you very much for your input and providing some guidance on that.
Yep.
Next up here, I got 2 sets of meeting minutes for July 6th and July 13th. Do I have a motion?
I move the board vote to accept the meeting minutes of July 6th and July 13th, 2021 as presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion for the
The
2
only
sets of
discussion is I did not attend the July 6th meeting.
Okay. Any further discussion? Let me see here. July 6th.
And I was not in the 13th.
And it shows you were not there, Mr. Mead. And on the 13th. Just make sure that that's. And I was not attending. Oh, no, I was there on the 13th. Okay. Any further discussion on the meeting minutes? Hearing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Mead?
Mead, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, I.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Okay, last up, we have reason to go into executive session for the purposes of reviewing and approving prior executive session meeting minutes. So therefore, I will have the board now consider entering an executive session in accordance with the open meeting law, chapter 30A, section 21A, pursuant to the purposes of approving prior meeting minutes. Do I have a such motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion going into executive session? Hearing none, all those by
I'm going to not enter into executive session. I don't think I have a link for that, so I'm going to leave for executive session.
So you will
Okay.
not be attending. Okay.
Okay, good night.
Good night. All those in favor by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Mead?
Mead, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often aye.
Carlson, aye. Declare the motion carried. We'll be entering executive session and only opening session for the purposes of adjournment. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great night.